66 million years ago, a celestial body concluded its cosmic journey in a blaze of planetary annihilation. That an asteroid struck the Earth is common knowledge. That the dinosaurs vanished in its wake is the foundation of our prehistoric understanding. But the true story, the one seldom told, unfolds not over eons, but in the first few hours after impact. And it is here, in this sliver of geologic time, that the world truly ended. The Earth was rendered dead. This is no metaphor. For thousands of kilometers around the point of impact, the surface temperature surged beyond that of a blacksmith's forge. All that could burn, burned. All that could not, melted into glowing rivers of slag. The very atmosphere above the Yucatan Peninsula ignited, a searing, incandescent wound on the face of the planet. And yet, in this literal inferno, something endured. It survived not because it was protected, but because it was small. It survived because it knew how to hide. Millions of years spent living under the feet of giants had taught it one singular vital lesson: be invisible. Stay beneath the earth. Never draw attention. This was the strategy of our ancestors. Small, furred creatures of the night, smelling of damp soil and perpetual fear. They did not know that the reign of titans had just been vaporized. Cowering in their burrows, they simply waited, as their kind had always done. Only this time, the wait would be longer. When they finally emerged, the world was no longer the same. It was silent, it was empty, and it was theirs. But the age of mammals did not dawn the next day. Between the fall of the old world and the true rise of the new lay a chasm of time, nearly 10 million years. This was the Paleocene, an epoch of ghosts and opportunity stretching from 66 to 56 million years ago. In this interval, mammals evolved with a velocity that still confounds paleontologists. From furtive, rat-sized scavengers to a bewildering diversity of forms, they exploded across the vacant globe. 10 million years, a mere moment by geological standards, was all it took. It was as if nature's great experiment was already prepared, waiting only for the stage to be cleared. The Paleocene is where the modern world truly begins. It is a dark, quiet, unsettling time, often overlooked because it lacks spectacle. There were no great mammoths, no saber-toothed hunters, no thundering herds of horses. There was something else, something transitional, undefined, not yet committed to a final form. These were creatures without modern analog, evolutionary prototypes in a world rebooting its biosphere. Most were dead ends, strange experiments that vanished as quickly as they appeared. They were the placeholders, the pioneers of a recovering planet. Our story is not written in the triumphant roar, but in the storm of knowing when to hide and when to emerge into a world made new. The Leviathans would come later. Theirs is a separate saga, a strange and winding return to the sea that deserves its own telling. But in the Paleocene, the world's oceans were not yet home to their song. The great void left by the dinosaurs was still an open question, an uncharted territory of evolutionary possibility. Here, in the humid forests of a recovering North America, some 63 million years ago, another story was beginning. It began with Purgatorius, a creature no larger than a squirrel, a fleeting shadow in the canopy. This small climbing primate, or sing, high in the branches of a Paleocene forest. This is our origin. There is no humiliation in this truth. There is only honesty. And in that honesty, a certain solace can be found. We did not begin with greatness, with thunderous footfalls or a crown of horns. We began with the art of survival. We began with the profound advantage of being small, of being overlooked in a world where every grand stage had been violently cleared. It is an ancient strategy, tested by fire and time, and it is a strategy that works. To understand the subtle math of the asteroid's impact, the sky was a shroud. A thick veil of dust and soot from global firestorms choked the atmosphere, blotting out the sun. For months, perhaps for years, photosynthesis ground to a halt. The green engines of the planet fell silent. Plants withered, and the animals though. But eventually, the dust settled, the sky cleared, and something unexpected occurred. The planetary temperature did not fall, it began to rise. The impact had vaporized the carbon-rich rock of the Yucatan Peninsula and ignited continent-spanning forests, injecting a colossal volume of carbon dioxide into the air. A runaway greenhouse effect took hold. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed, the planet began to heat. By the mid-Paleocene, Earth was a world transformed, significantly warmer than our own. Tropical rainforests sprawled across latitudes that are now tundra. Crocodilians swam in the balmy waters of the Arctic. Palm trees swayed on the shores of what would one day become the North Sea. It was a hothouse world, humid, lush, and teeming with life, all scrambling to fill the vacancies of power. And in this sweltering greenhouse, the mammals grew. They grew in the most literal sense, expanding in size and ambition. It is a principle known as Cope's rule. In a warm climate with abundant resources, life tends to evolve toward greater mass. A larger body offers greater opportunities. And so, over the span of a few million years, but the world was not yet stable. Another blow was coming, not from the heavens, but from the Earth itself. 56 million years ago, the planet experienced a climatic convulsion so violent it has its own name, the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum, or PETM. In what was, by geological standards, a mere instant, perhaps 20,000 years, global temperatures surged by another 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. The exact trigger remains a subject of intense debate. Perhaps it was a massive volcanic eruption, a sudden, catastrophic release of methane from the seabed, or a cause we have yet to uncover. But the consequences were brutally clear. The world's oceans became acidic, triggering a mass extinction in the deep sea. Climate zones shifted violently across the globe, forcing a frantic migration of life. This new world, born from one catastrophe, was now being forged in the crucible of another. It was a profound reminder that the story of life is not a steady march of progress, but a series of violent interruptions and improbable recoveries, a testament to the sheer, stubborn resilience of existence itself. And once again, life found itself under pressure. And then again. Stress, it seems, is the engine of creation. A planetary fever gripped the world, an event we now call the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum. It was a climactic chaos, a world convulsing under a surge of heat and carbon. And precisely on this violent boundary, in this crucible of change, the first true ungulates appeared. They called it Hyracotherium, the dawn horse. It was a creature scarcely the size of a fox, navigating a world of suffocating heat. With 4 toes on its front feet and 3 on its back, it bore no resemblance to the thundering majesty we know today. It shared nothing with the modern horse, except for a single, revolutionary idea. The idea of a creature that runs. An animal that weaponizes speed, that makes of escape a survival strategy. And this concept, born in the stress of the PETM 56 million years ago, would, across an unimaginable gulf of time, culminate in an animal that would rewrite the very course of human history. The fever eventually broke, giving way to the long, humid greenhouse of the Eocene epoch. From 56 to 34 million years ago, the Cenozoic era revealed its true potential. Global temperatures were several degrees higher than our own. Lush forests stretched from pole to pole. The seas were warm, shallow, and rich with life. And in this terrestrial paradise, a lineage of mammals made a decision so profound, so counterintuitive, it remains one of the most astonishing stories in the history of life. They went back to the water. This is the story of the whales. 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, on the swampy shores of the ancient Tethys Ocean, where modern-day Pakistan and India now lie, lived a creature named Pakicetus. It was a quadruped, the size of a wolf, with the general appearance of a dog. It was a land dweller, bound by fur, warm blood, and lungs that breathed the air. Yet it haunted the water's edge, a predator snatching fish from the shallows, already feeling the pull of the abyss. Billion years. The body began to yield to the pressures of a fluid world. Legs, once essential for pursuit on land, began to shrink. The hind limbs withered, becoming first flippers, then mere memories. The nostrils, in a feat of anatomical engineering, migrated from the tip of the snout to the crown of the head, becoming a blowhole. The coat of fur, a liability in the water, vanished, replaced by the sleek insulation of blubber. The body elongated, streamlined, becoming a living torpedo. 10 million years after Pakicetus waded in the shallows, the ocean was home to Basilosaurus, a 40-meter leviathan, a fully aquatic hunter, a king of the sea. And yet, tucked away on its immense flanks were two tiny, useless hind legs, complete with knees and toes, a ghostly echo of a life lived on solid ground. A rapid, it borders on the impossible. It shows us that evolution has no direction, that our concept of progress is a human illusion. Life flows not forward, but outward, into any void that offers purchase, any niche that offers sustenance. The ancestors of mammals had crawled from the sea over 300 million years before. In the Eocene, their descendants simply saw an opportunity and returned. The strategy is always the same: go where the space is. But while these pioneers were reconquering the oceans, another, quieter revolution was beginning in the canopy of the world's forests. For the Eocene was also the dawn of the first true primates. No longer the kit, grasping hands, and most critically, eyes that had shifted from the sides of the head to the front. This granted them something new: binocular vision. The world was no longer a flat tapestry, but a landscape of depth, of distance, of dimension. It was a subtle shift, a minor adjustment in the grand theater of life. But in that newfound ability to perceive the world in three dimensions, a new path of perception, of intelligence, of consciousness itself had just begun. It began with forward-facing eyes, built for judging distance in a world of branches. It began with hands, possessing the revolutionary power to hold and to manipulate. And it began with a brain, already growing in relative size, a nascent engine of curiosity. These were our ancestors, primates of the Eocene epoch, living out their lives in the vast, humid tropical forests that blanketed Africa and Asia, jungles far more extensive than any that survive today. They climbed. They foraged for fruit and insects. They were utterly unsuspecting. Not a single one of them could have known that in more than 30 million years, one of their distant descendants would rise to stand upon two legs. That this creature would strike stone against stone to create a tool. That it would press pigment to a cave wall to capture the spirit of the hunt. That it would call itself Homo sapiens and begin to ask the most profound question of all: where did we come from? To dwell on this is to experience a strange vertigo of time. That Eocene primate perched in the canopy of a lost world, and you, hearing these words now, are connected by the same single line of life. It is an unbroken thread stretching across more than 30 million years, a chain of inheritance with not a single link missing. Generation after generation, passing forward a legacy of genes, of survival strategies, of random mutations that proved, by sheer luck, to be useful. This entire staggering chain of accidents ultimately led to a being that contemplates the nature of long chains of accident. Then came the Oligocene. 34 million years ago, the world changed. On the scale of geological time, the shift was almost instantaneous. Antarctica, which in the Eocene had been a warm continent covered in temperate forests, began to freeze. An ice sheet of continental scale started to grow, locking away immense volumes of water. The sea level plummeted. The global thermostat was turned down. The long, stable era of planetary warmth and riotous vegetation was ending. Something new was beginning, something harsher, more volatile, and far less predictable. Why then? The question is a puzzle with no single answer. The relentless drift of the continents had finally torn South America away from Antarctica, opening the deep water channel known as the Drake Passage. This momentous event fundamentally rewired the planet's ocean currents, isolating the southern continent in a vortex of frigid water. Simultaneously, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere fell, partly consumed by blooms of phytoplankton in the chilling seas. Tectonics, chemistry, biology, all converged at a single point in deep time to create a profound climatic fracture. The world, which had been a greenhouse for 60 million years, began its long, slow journey into the ice ages. And once again, stress became the engine of creation. For in the cooling, drying world of the Oligocene, a new form of life appeared, the first grasses. It seems an insignificant detail, but this was no less than a planetary revolution. Before the Oligocene, the world was a place of forests and shrublands. Grass was a rarity. But grass means open space. Grass creates an entirely different ecosystem, offering different opportunities and demanding different strategies for survival. Its appearance was a quiet promise, paving the way for the world that would arrive in the Miocene. The world of the great savannas, of vast open plains, and of creatures that would run across them faster than anything that had come before. The Miocene, from 23 to 5 million years ago. This was perhaps the richest and most biologically diverse epoch of the entire Cenozoic era. The climate stabilized, settling into a temperate middle ground, neither a hothouse nor an icebox, and the grasslands, born in the Oligocene, now exploded across Africa, Eurasia, and North America. Life responded with an evolutionary detonation, a burst of creativity that is astonishing even by the standards of our planet's history. The Miocene was an age of biological experiments, a time of creatures that seemed to defy our neat categories, a world teeming with possibilities, forged in the crucible of global change. It was on these emergent plains, under a Miocene sun, that the next chapter of our own story would begin to unfold, driven by the pressures and the promises of a world remade. The familiar landscapes of the deep past are often deceptive. 25 million years ago, across the forests of Central Asia, a shadow fell that was not cast by a cloud. It belonged to the Paraceratherium, a colossal, hornless rhinoceros. Standing 5 meters at the shoulder and weighing an almost incomprehensible 20 tons, it remains the largest land mammal ever to walk the earth. This was a living mountain of flesh and bone, moving with a purpose that reshaped the very world around it. It browsed not on bushes, but on the crowns of trees, stripping foliage from heights no other creature could dream of reaching. This was gigantism as an evolutionary strategy, a declaration of dominance written in sheer scale. To become so immense that the very concept of competition becomes irrelevant. But this strategy was not confined to the land. In the warm Miocene seas, another giant held sway. Carcharocles megalodon, a shark measuring some 18 meters in length, a predator the size of 2 city buses placed end to end. Its mouth was a gallery of horrors, lined with teeth that were 17-centimeter daggers of serrated enamel. It did not hunt fish, it hunted whales. Not the smaller species, but the true titans of the ocean. For this creature, a great whale was not an adversary, not a trophy to be won in a monumental struggle. It was simply food, an ordinary meal in the vast blue silence. And here, the mind struggles to hold two realities at once. For this oceanic apex predator existed in the same world at the same time as our own distant ancestors. While the megalodon patrolled the depths, on the continent of Africa, early hominids, small and cautious, were navigating the branches of the forest canopy. The scale is almost impossible to reconcile. In the sea, an animal for whom a whale was lunch. On land, a small primate for whom a fallen fruit was a feast. 20 million years ago, they lived and died on the same planet, beneath the same sun, each utterly unaware of the other's existence. It is one of the profound, disorienting truths of the Cenozoic era, a world of simultaneous, disparate epochs. It was within this world, during the Miocene, approximately 14 million years ago, that an event occurred. An event so quiet it made no sound, yet it would determine the entire future of our lineage. The evolutionary line that would eventually lead to humanity diverged from the one that would produce our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees and bonobos. There was no cataclysm, no dramatic sundering. It was a slow, geographic parting of the waves. A single population of African primates, fractured by a changing landscape, began to drift apart. One group remained in the deep, familiar sanctuary of the forest. The other, pushed by forces we can only guess at, began to venture into the open spaces at its edge. These two paths, the canopy and the savanna, would, over millions of years, sculpt two profoundly different kinds of being from the same ancestral clay. This is our genesis point, a moment lost to time when a single primate, perhaps driven by hunger or fleeing a shadow in the branches, stepped beyond the tree line. We will never find its bones. We will never identify this specific, pivotal instant in the fossil record. It was an event too mundane, too ordinary to leave a scar on the earth. But it happened. And in that simple, unremarkable act, everything changed. The world continued to shift. The Pliocene epoch, stretching from 5 million to 2,600,000 years ago, saw the planet's climate continue its cooling trend. The great forests of Africa receded, surrendering territory to the relentless expansion of the open savanna. It was in this new world, a world of vanishing trees and vast exposed plains, that our ancestors were forced into a radical reinvention. They stood up. They rose onto two legs. This was not a triumphant stride towards a preordained destiny. It was not an adaptation for speed. A quadruped is almost always faster. It was not a design for comfort. The immense strain of bipedalism on the spine and knees has left a legacy of pain that afflicts us to this day. The upright posture was a compromise, a desperate gamble made for a host of other reasons. To see over the tall grass, to free the hands to carry food or wield simple tools, to better regulate body temperature under a punishing sun. None of these pressures involved a desire to become human. There was no goal, no finish line. There was only a changing world and the stark imperative to adapt or disappear. Some mutations, once neutral or even detrimental, suddenly offered a sliver of an advantage in this new, unforgiving landscape. They were the traits of survivors, the accidental architects of a future they could never have imagined. A chance mutation found to be useful. Then another. A cascade of accidents hardening into a system. Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus. This was never a straight line, an inevitable march from ape to man. It was a bush, a sprawling, tangled, chaotic bush of species, the vast majority of which were dead ends, branches that withered and fell, leaving no descendants. From an African cradle, the genus Homo explored the world. Homo erectus pushed all the way into Asia, its ancient bones unearthed from the soils of Java and the caves of China. In Europe, Homo heidelbergensis stared out across a continent of ice and wind. And then came the Neanderthals, a separate, profoundly successful lineage. They were intelligent, with an emerging culture, with tools of stone and bone. They cared for their sick and buried their dead, inhabiting a vast territory from Western Europe to the heart of Asia. And then, somewhere in Africa, around 200,000 years ago, a new species appeared, Homo sapiens. They were not preordained conquerors. They were simply one more twig on the crowded family tree, one more of nature's experiments, one more wager placed on the unforgiving table of survival. Most bets on that table had already been lost. Why this one paid off is a question that may never have a final answer. Perhaps it was a unique cognitive flexibility. Perhaps it was the dawn of true symbolic language, the power to describe what was not there, to share myths, to plan for a future that existed only in the collective imagination. Perhaps it was an unprecedented ability to cooperate in vast numbers, to trust strangers bound not by blood, but by a shared story. Or perhaps It was a single point in time and space to create a result that no one and nothing had ever planned. This is the story of the Cenozoic era, 66 million years of it. It begins with a tiny, furred creature, perhaps a Purgatorius, clinging to a branch in the twilight of a new world, a planet scoured clean by fire from the sky, and it leads to us. From a scorched planetary surface to cities of glass and steel, to forests and oceans teeming with a renewed explosion of life. From an animal hiding in a burrow to a Homo sapiens writing its name. It is one single story, long, convoluted, filled with false starts, blind alleys, and astonishing turns of fortune. And in this story, there is no protagonist. There is only life itself, relentlessly filling every available space. Any space, by any means, under any conditions. The megalodon, undisputed sovereign of the global ocean, vanished around 3 million years ago when a cooling climate shifted the migratory patterns of the great whales, its primary source of food. The Paraceratherium, the largest mammal to ever walk the land, disappeared much earlier, some 23 million years ago, as the forests of Central Asia gave way to open grasslands. The Neanderthals were gone by 40,000 years ago, for reasons still fiercely debated. Were they violently displaced by us? Were they simply absorbed, assimilated into our own expanding population? The ghost of their genome lives on within us. Modern, non-African humans carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal. The dinosaurs, if they thought at all, surely thought their reign was forever. For the megalodon, the ocean was its eternal kingdom. For the Paraceratherium, the continent was its birthright. Each dominant species in each epoch of this was revealed to be not final, but temporary. This is the great lesson the Cenozoic teaches. Not that life wins. Life is neither a winner nor a loser. Life simply continues. The lesson is that in biology, the word forever has no meaning. There is only for now. There is only the fleeting moment where a species is perfectly adapted to the world as it is. And when the conditions change, everything changes. 66 million years ago, the conditions changed utterly. It came without warning. A radical, instantaneous erasure, 66 million years in the past. And in the aftermath, those who endured were not superior to the titans they replaced. Their survival was owed to a different set of virtues, the ability to be small, to seek refuge in the cracks of a broken world, to simply wait. And when the long darkness finally lifted, they emerged into a silent inheritance. The world was theirs. But this is only the story of the surface, a chronicle of fire and ash. There is another history, one written in the soil and the shadows. While the continents burned under a sky of soot, a quiet, unseen, and patient revolution was taking place beneath the scorched earth. And it was this subterranean epoch that would dictate the course of all life to come. The fungi. For months, perhaps for years, as the heavens remained choked with dust, photosynthesis ground to a halt. The great engine of life had stalled. But the fungi do not bow to the sun. They ask only for the dead, and the dead were everywhere, an endless bounty. Billions of tons of fallen forests, of slain leviathans, of every plant and creature caught in the blast. For the fungal kingdom, this planetary graveyard was not an apocalypse, it was a feast. While the grand lineages of the Mesozoic withered into memory, the fungi flourished. This is not mere speculation. The evidence is etched into the very stone of the planet. Geologists call it the KPG boundary, a thin, dark line separating the age of reptiles from the age of mammals, the Cretaceous from the Paleogene. And precisely at this boundary, within a layer no thicker than a single centimeter, the rock tells an astonishing tale. A sudden, explosive spike in the number of fungal spores. It is a fungal apocalypse, frozen in time. For a season, the Earth became a planet of mushrooms. Only later, as the atmosphere slowly cleared and light once more graced the surface, did the first green shoots of recovery begin. But they could not have done so without the silent work that came before. The fungi were the planet's first responders. They were the great decomposers, patiently breaking down the vast necropolis, transforming death into a substrate for new life. They literally prepared the soil, enriching the barren ash for the return of plants. And with the plants came everything else. This reveals a profound truth about resilience. Recovery does not begin with the most conspicuous, nor the most heroic. It begins with the most steadfast, with those who can labor in darkness, who can draw sustenance from ruin. The patient, invisible work of fungi, deep in the gloom of a shattered world. This was the foundation upon which our own distant ancestors would eventually ride. But they were not the only inheritors. We speak of the Cenozoic as the age of mammals, yet we often overlook another dynasty, one with a far more ancient and terrible lineage: the birds. And this is not poetry, not a metaphor. They are, in the most literal sense, the last of the dinosaurs. A single branch of that mighty tree that weathered the storm. And what they did in the dawn of this new world is one of the era's most peculiar tales. In the Paleocene and Eocene, as life tentatively reclaimed the continents, some of these avian survivors did the unthinkable. They abandoned the skies. Evolutionarily, they unlearned the miracle of flight. Flying is expensive. It demands immense energy, a high price to pay when the world below was suddenly vacant, teeming with opportunity and devoid of its former masters. With the great terrestrial predators gone, the ground was a frontier, and so some birds chose to walk it. They grew large. And then they grew terrifying. From the ashes of the old world rose giants, the terror birds. These were not the dinosaurs of the past, but a strange and brutal echo. Creatures that stood over 3 meters tall with massive hooked beaks designed to crush bone. For millions of years, they were the apex predators of their continents, a fearsome testament to evolution's strange and winding path. The history of life is not a straight line from the simple to the complex, from the weak to the strong. It is a story of accidents and opportunists, of the small inheriting the earth from the great, and of silent, unseen laborers preparing the way, but in the patient, quiet work of the survivor, waiting in the dark. In the shadow of a global catastrophe, with the age of reptiles brought to a smoldering end, a strange and powerful irony began to unfold. The dinosaurs were not entirely gone. They lived on in their most adaptable descendants, the birds. And in a stunning evolutionary reversal, some of these survivors began to reclaim the terrestrial thrones their ancestors had lost. They gave up the sky, their wings becoming vestiges of a freedom they no longer needed. They were returning to the earth, not as scavengers, but as kings. Across the forests of post-dinosaur Europe and North America, a new titan stalked the land. It was called Gastornis. Standing over 2 meters tall, it was a walking fortress of muscle and bone, crowned with a beak of terrifying proportions, a massive hooked weapon with the crushing force of a through. The primeval woodlands, a living echo of a saurian past, consuming anything that could not escape its path. It was as if evolution, in a moment of reflection, had looped back upon itself, reminding the world what a dinosaur truly was before feathers were for flight. But the reign of Gastornis was fleeting. As the Eocene epoch dawned, a new kind of predator emerged, the warm-blooded, sharp-toothed mammals. The world grew crowded, and the giant bird's time on the stage came to an end. Yet, on another continent, this story was just beginning. For millions of years, South America was an island, a vast evolutionary laboratory cut off from the rest of the world. Here, the avian dynasty did not just survive, it thrived, reaching its most terrifying apex. They were the Phorusrhacids, better known as the terror birds. For nearly 60 million years, from the Paleocene to the cusp of the Pleistocene, they were the undisputed masters of their domain. Imagine a predator 3 meters in height, a feathered nightmare capable of sprinting at 70 kilometers an hour. Their defining feature was a skull tipped with a wickedly curved beak, a biological pickaxe they used not for tearing flesh, but for shattering bone, repeatedly bludgeoning their prey's skull against the hard earth. For 60 million years, they held dominion. This was a reign of such immense duration that entire orders of mammalian predators rose and fell in the north, while the terror birds remained, an unshakable dynasty of feathered tyrants. Then, the world changed. Tectonic forces grinding away for eons finally connected the two great American continents. Roughly 3 million years ago, the Isthmus of Panama rose from the sea, forging a land bridge where once there was only ocean. This event triggered one of the greatest biological migrations in Earth's history, the Great American Interchange. From the north, a tide of new competitors flooded south: jaguars, pumas, and the formidable saber-toothed cats. From the south, giant sloths and armadillos ambled north. For the terror birds, it was the beginning of the end. Their downfall was not a simple matter of being outfought by a superior predator. It was a catastrophe of context. The invaders from the north were not a single entity, but a diverse portfolio of hunters, each with its own strategy. Diversity overwhelmed specialization. The forest racids were perfectly adapted to the world they had ruled for 60 million years. But that world was now gone, and their perfection had become a cage. It is the Cenozoic's most persistent lesson. Specialization is a key to a locked room, but flexibility is the master key to all doors. And while these epic dramas played out, while giant rhinos roamed Europe and the megalodon patrolled the seas, another story was unfolding, almost in a whisper. On the continent of Africa, a quiet fuse was being lit. Here, in the dense Oligocene forests some 30 million years ago, lived a creature known as proconsul. It was an early ape, a foundational being. Not a human, not a chimpanzee, but a common blueprint from which both and the gorilla would eventually diverge. While the terror birds perfected the art of the killing blow, these small, unassuming primates were honing a different set of tools: grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, and a burgeoning social intelligence. In a world dominated by giants and ruled by brute force, their path to survival was not through size or speed, but through complexity. The future did not belong to the most fearsome, it belonged to the most adaptable. In the quiet canopy of Africa, an evolutionary narrative was being written that would prove more significant than all the others combined. A story not of the beak or the claw, but of the mind that would one day look back and wonder at it all. In the dense canopy of an Africa long vanished, a creature moved through the branches. No larger than a small baboon, this was proconsul, an ancestor to the great apes, and to us. It spent its days navigating the high world of the forest, dining on fruit, and in its anatomy, it carried two quiet but profound prophecies. The first was the absence of a tail. This was more than a minor detail. It was a declaration of a new lineage, a subtle shift in balance and posture that distinguished the hominoids from the monkeys they shared the forest with. The second was hidden from view. Inside its skull, a brain pulsed with a volume just slightly greater than that of its contemporaries, a mere fraction more, an almost insignificant surplus of neural tissue. Yet this faint whisper of a promise, this marginal advantage, would, over the expanse of 30 million years, compound into the very consciousness that now contemplates its own origin. There were no dramatic leaps, no sudden flashes of brilliance. The process was one of slow, inexorable accumulation. Each generation, a fractional increase in cerebral mass. Each millennium, a slightly more complex map of the world, a slightly broader repertoire of solutions to the ancient problems of survival. It was a force as patient and powerful as water carving stone. Not through might, but through the relentless pressure of time. Then, during the Miocene epoch, the world changed. The climate grew arid, and the great African forests began to retreat, surrendering territory to vast, open grasslands. This environmental shift forced a division, a great schism in our ancestral line. One branch clung to the familiar embrace of the trees. They remained with the forest, and the forest, in turn, preserved them. Their descendants are with us still, the chimpanzees and gorillas, living echoes of a world that has all but disappeared. But another branch was cast out. They stepped from the dwindling shade into the immense, unforgiving expanse of the savanna. And here, they faced a set of challenges for which their forest lives had left them utterly unprepared. In the forest, life is contained. Food hangs overhead, water is never far, and shelter is woven into the very fabric of the environment. On the open plains, existence is scattered. A source of food may lie in one direction, a water hole in another, and a safe place to rest in a third, all separated by perilous distances. To survive was to walk. This relentless demand for travel gave rise to a revolutionary advantage: bipedalism. Not because it was faster, it was not, but because it was cheaper. To walk on two legs as a primate consumes dramatically less energy than walking on four. This is a simple biomechanical truth, confirmed by precise measurement. In a world where every calorie was precious, where vast distances had to be crossed under a punishing sun, this metabolic efficiency was not a convenience. It was the razor-thin margin between life and death. To stand on 2 feet is to liberate the hands. And liberated hands are destined to grasp, to carry, to manipulate. They picked up a stone, a fallen branch, the heavy bone of a carcass. These were not yet tools in the way we understand them. Their use was not born of foresight or planning. It was a cascade of contingent advantages, a chain of fortunate accidents where, in a specific moment, for a specific task, holding an object proved slightly better than the alternative. Over millions of years, this chain of accidents forged a new kind of being, one that no longer just used objects, but began to fashion them with intent. A creature that could hold an image in its mind of a tool that did not yet exist, and then bring it into being. A creature that began to think about what it was doing. And then came the most radical turn in the entire history of the Cenozoic era. More strange, more consequential than the rise of the megalodon shark or the colossal Paraceratherium. It was the moment one species learned to transmit knowledge, not through the slow, patient code of genes, but through the fleeting vibrations of sound, through words. Before this, all knowledge in the natural world traveled on the glacial current of genetics. For a new skill or a vital piece of information to spread, the individuals who possessed it had to out-reproduce those who did not. The process took thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes millions of years. But when language was born, knowledge achieved the speed of sound. A father could show his son how to fracture flint in a single lesson. A hunter could tell his clan precisely where he saw a herd grazing. A shaman could explain which plant cured a fever and which one brought death. Information that once took millennia to encode into a species could now be shared in minutes. It was the birth of culture, the dawn of a collective mind. It was the moment experience ceased to die with the experienced, and instead became a story, a lesson, a legacy. A single mind could now borrow the sight of another, could learn from a mistake it never made, and build upon a discovery from a generation long since passed to dust. The world was no longer just what one being could see and touch, but what the entire tribe knew, remembered, and could imagine together. The great engine of evolution, for millennia driven by the slow, grinding machinery of genetics, was usurped. A new force had emerged, one not passed through blood, but through breath. Not through genes, but through words. In a span of time that was, by evolutionary standards, instantaneous, a single generation, a novel idea could rewrite the survival manual for an entire tribe. Within a few generations, it became the shared inheritance of a people. The ancient rules of existence were not merely altered, they were shattered, and new ones forged in their place. Genetic evolution continued its patient, deliberate march, but alongside it now ran another current, a torrent of change, swift and powerful. This was cultural evolution, where an innovation did not need to wait for its carriers to produce more offspring. It needed only to be told. And so the Cenozoic era, which until this point had unfolded at the deliberate pace of geological change, suddenly began to quicken. 200,000 years ago, the stage was set with the arrival of Homo sapiens. Then, 70,000 years ago, came a revolution not of the body, but of the mind. The first true symbolic thought ignited across the neural pathways of our ancestors. The first adornments, whispering of identity and belonging. The first tentative drawings, marks of a new consciousness grappling with the world. 40,000 years ago, deep within the limestone walls of Chauvet Cave in France, this consciousness exploded into form. Images of bison, lions, and horses, rendered with such startling precision and vitality that they leave modern artists breathless with admiration. 12,000 years ago, the entire relationship between humanity and the earth was redefined by agriculture. 5,000 years ago, the ephemeral spoken word was captured, made permanent by the invention of writing. 200 years ago, the Industrial Revolution harnessed the power of ancient sunlight trapped in coal and remade the surface of the planet. In the last 50 years, the digital revolution has compressed space and time into an intangible network of light and information. This acceleration, a relentless, near-exponential curve, is the direct consequence of language. Each generation does not begin anew. It receives the accumulated knowledge of all who came before, standing on a vast mountain of discovery, and adds its own small stone to the peak. This is the great divergence, the singular trait that separates our story from every other species in the Cenozoic. The megalodon, a titan of the ancient seas, evolved through the patient crucible of genetics over millions of years. We evolved through culture, through story, through shared knowledge. A process so rapid, a single generation can pivot the destiny of the entire species. This does not make us superior to the megalodon in some absolute cosmic sense. It is simply a different strategy. A strategy that, in the unique conditions of our world, proved devastatingly effective. But this unprecedented strategy carries a dark reflection, a shadow that haunts the history of our era. The Cenozoic whispers a cautionary tale, written in the fossil record of those who came before. It is the paradox of dominance. Each species that rose to rule its domain began, inexorably, to reshape the world in its own image. A change so profound, the world eventually ceased to be a home for its architect. The megalodon may have consumed the great whales with such efficiency that its food source dwindled into oblivion. The Paraceratherium, a colossal herbivore, may have transformed the very forests it fed upon until the altered vegetation could no longer sustain it. This is not malice, it is mechanics. A sufficiently successful species changes its environment, and the environment, in turn, changes against it. In Homo sapiens, we alter our environment with a speed and scale that dwarfs any species in the planet's history. Faster than the dinosaurs, more profoundly than the megalodon. We also do not just extend our reach, they multiply our impact. Our numbers are vast, and our presence is global. This is not an exercise in catastrophism. It is simply an observation of a pattern the Cenozoic demonstrates time and again. A dominant species alters its world. The altered world, in turn, exerts a new and powerful pressure upon that species. The species must then adapt, or it will vanish. The terror birds, the forest wrasses, could not adapt to the new predators that poured down from the north. The megalodon could not adapt to an ocean with fewer giants to hunt. The great feedback loop of life and consequence does not make exceptions. The question that hangs in the balance of our accelerated age is not whether the pattern applies to us, but whether our unique evolution has given us the wisdom to write a different ending. The world changed faster than Y yielded a fatal result. Perhaps they did not vanish entirely, but live on as a faint echo within our own DNA, a ghostly whisper from a lost world. We, the survivors, continue to adapt. Our tool is not the slow, grinding engine of genetic selection, but the lightning-fast engine of culture. Yet the fundamental question remains unanswered. The deep history of the Cenozoic era offers no final verdicts. It offers only patterns. And the most profound pattern it reveals is that no state of being is absolute. There is no forever. There is only what works for now. We look back to the Pleistocene, an epoch stretching from 2,600,000 years ago to a mere 11,700 years before the present. This was the Great Age of Ice, a succession of glacial periods separated by brief, warmer interglacials gripped the planet. The one each monumental swing, life was forced to respond. Entire species were erased from existence, while new ones arose in their place. Ecosystems dissolved and reformed. The very maps of life were redrawn on a continental scale. This was the world of the megafauna, a menagerie of giants that feel strangely familiar, for they are the subjects of our oldest art. Vast herds of mammoths, their tusks curving towards frozen skies. Woolly rhinoceros, armored against the biting wind. The colossal cave bear, a slumbering titan in the deep dark. And the cave lion, larger and more powerful than any feline alive today. And moving through the sparse forests was the Megaloceros giganteus, the Irish elk, a deer of impossible scale, bearing a crown of bone that spanned more than 3.5 meters. This was not a fantasy. This was the world our ancestors witnessed with their own eyes. A world they rendered in charcoal and ochre in the flickering firelight of caves at Lascaux and Altamira. A world whose stories were told around campfires, passed down through generations. And then, this world, this vibrant Pleistocene kingdom of giants, vanished. Around 12,000 years ago, as the last ice age shuddered to a close, the silence began. The mammoths were gone. The woolly rhinos disappeared. The Irish elk fell. The cave bears slept and never woke. This was the Pleistocene extinction event, a biological cataclysm that swept away the majority of the planet's large terrestrial animals. In North America, the native horses, camels, mastodons, and giant ground sloths were wiped from the continent. In Australia, the casualties included giant wombats, towering kangaroos, and the rhinoceros-sized diprotodon. The cause remains one of paleontology's most enduring debates. Two suspects stand accused. The first is climate. The end of the Ice Age was not a gentle warming, but a chaotic restructuring of global weather patterns and ecosystems. The second suspect is a new and uniquely lethal predator, spreading with unprecedented speed across the globe, Homo sapiens. The timeline is damning. It was precisely at this time that spear-wielding hunters crossed into North America, and within a few thousand years, its megafauna was gone. It was in this same broad period that humans reached Australia, and soon after, its giant marsupials began their slide into oblivion. Was it the climate, or was species under immense stress shrinking their habitats and disrupting their food sources? Into this vulnerable world stepped the human hunter, intelligent, cooperative, and relentless. For species that had evolved for millions of years without such a predator, there was no time to develop defensive behaviors. The combined pressure proved lethal. This was a turning point in the history of the planet. For the first time, the actions of a single species could radically alter the global biosphere, not over millions of years, but in a matter of millennia. With the dawn of agriculture and industry, that timescale would shrink further, to centuries, and then to mere decades. We now live in the Holocene, the 11,700 years of deceptive calm since the last ice age. A warm, stable paradise by Pleistocene standards. But the patterns of deep time are a constant, humbling reminder. The world we have inherited is not a permanent gift, but a temporary arrangement, a system that only works for. Out of a rare and precious stability, an interglacial epoch, agriculture blossomed. Within this fleeting geological breath, the first cities rose from the earth. Within this stillness, the first texts were written, scratched into wet clay under a Mesopotamian sun, the cuneiform tablets of Sumer. It was in this same pocket of calm that pyramids were raised, monuments of stone and mathematics rising from the desert sands. Philosophy was born, mathematics was codified, and eventually, satellites were flung into the silent darkness of space. All of this in just 11,000 years. Less than 1% of the duration of the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. Our entire recorded existence is but a single point of punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. Yet, compressed into that final point is everything we call history, everything we claim as civilization. Every war and every discovery, every catastrophe and every triumph. The entire conversation of humanity, from Sumerian tablets to the hum of the digital age. All of our music, all of our literature, all of our science exists within this dot at the close of a 66 million year long narrative. But the Cenozoic era has not ended. We are living inside it. The Holocene, the latest of its epochs, continues. What happens next remains profoundly unknown, for the Cenozoic has never announced its intentions. It has only ever changed the conditions, and life has always been forced to react, to survive or to perish, to adapt or to vanish, to find new paths or to reach a dead end. 66 million years ago, a small, furred creature huddled in a burrow did not know it was surviving the end of a world. It simply sat in the darkness and waited. It did what it was built to do, and when it finally emerged, the world was utterly transformed, and that new world belonged to it. We are that creature. In our deepest biology, we are still that same being, driven by the same fundamental strategy. Only now, we possess language. We build cities. We wield tools that amplify our influence to a planetary scale. Yet at our core is the same instinct, the adaptability, the capacity to endure the darkness and step out into the light when the moment arrives. The Cenozoic continues. We are adrift in its currents. And where it carries us next depends on whether we prove to be flexi terror birds, the Phorusrhacids, or the mighty megalodon. The great pendulum of time is still in motion. There is an animal, however, that is almost never spoken of in the grand story of the Cenozoic. It is not the mammoth, nor the megalodon, nor the terror bird. Their images are etched into textbooks and museum halls. This one is a ghost, a profound mistake because this creature existed for far longer than most, and its story challenges our very understanding of how evolution works. Its name is Arsinoitherium, a two-horned giant the size of a modern rhinoceros that roamed the swamplands of northern Africa 36 million years ago during the late Eocene. But hair two enormous conical projections of solid bone, jutting for titan of its time. But its strangeness is not in its size or its formidable horns. The true mystery began when paleontologists searched for its relatives. They found none. Absolutely none. In the fossil record, Arsinoitherium appears without ancestors and vanishes without descendants. It is one of the most baffling phenomena in all of paleontology, a creature that seems to materialize from nowhere, thrive for several million years, and then disappears into nothingness. It represents an evolutionary dead end, but not because it was poorly adapted. It was a success. Its lineage simply stopped, without reason, without explanation, a ghost in the grand machinery of life. Arsinoitherium stands as a silent testament to the fact that survival is not always a continuous branching tree. Sometimes a branch is just a branch, magnificent and strong, but ultimately leading nowhere. It is a reminder that even the most successful forms can be mere experiments, temporary solutions in the unending trial of the Cenozoic. And as we stand within this same unfinished era, we are left to wonder if our own spectacular ascent is part of a lasting dynasty, or just another brilliant, solitary form, destined to leave behind nothing but enigmatic bones. The Cenozoic era is crowded with ghosts. far more than we are led to believe. We imagine evolution as a great tree, its branches reaching ever upward, each one a purposeful step towards some final, perfected form. But the reality is far more chaotic. It is not a tree, but a tangled, sprawling bush, and the vast majority of its branches snap, ending abruptly in the empty air. Most species that have ever lived are extinct, leaving no descendants. They simply were, and then were not. Their existence was a brief, brilliant flash in the immensity of deep time. Consider the Arsinotherium, a creature of immense substance, weighing several tons. It trampled the damp earth of a forgotten Africa. Its twin horns, not of keratin but of solid bone, jutted side by side from its snout, a formidable and unique adaptation. For millions of years, it was a real and concrete presence on this planet. Yet we do not remember it. Its story led nowhere. Its branch of the great bush withered, and history, as we write it, has no room for cul-de-sacs. This is the profound lesson of the Cenozoic, a lesson that dismantles our cherished notion of progress. It does so carefully, methodically, with every new fossil unearthed. For when one looks upon this era with honesty, there is no clear arrow of advancement. There is only change. Constant, relentless, directionless change. Something appears, something vanishes, something is transformed. But there are no clean lines ascending from simple to complex, from primitive to perfect. There is only diversity, a vast, profligate, almost wasteful explosion of forms, the majority of which were destined for nothing more than their own brief moment under the sun. We, the survivors, the last twig on a fortunate branch, look back and see a grand narrative culminating in us. It is the ultimate illusion of the victor. If the Arsinotherium could have written a history of the world, its final chapter would have been its own magnificent reign, and in its own time, it would have been just as right and just as wrong as we are. But among these countless forgotten histories, one moment stands apart. Not the fall of the dinosaurs, that story is too well known, nor the rise of humanity, that ending is too self-congratulatory. We turn instead to a time 34 million years ago, a boundary between epochs, between worlds, a moment geologists call the Grande Coupure, the Great Break, so named by the French paleontologists who first saw the stark evidence in the rock. The Grande Coupure was a cataclysm ridden in silence, a near-total replacement of an entire continent's fauna. In what was, by geological standards, a heartbeat, the creatures that had defined Europe for an age vanished. In their place, a new cast of characters arrived. Pouring in from the vast change was so abrupt, so total, that in the fossil record it appears as a scar, a clean line drawn through time. Below the line, one world. Above it, another. The engine of this great replacement was not a meteor, but a slow, inexorable chill. The planet was cooling. On the far side of the world, Antarctica was beginning to surrender to ice, its great sheet forming for the first time, locking away the world's warmth. In Europe, the change was profound. The lush, tropical forests of the Eocene withered, retreating before cooler, drier plains. The native fauna, perfectly adapted to a warm, humid paradise, could not endure the new reality. Their world dissolved around them. But across a newly formed land bridge, invaders from Asia, already hardened by a more temperate climate, were waiting. It was a great migration with no destination, a conquest with no conqueror, driven not by will or intent, but by the blind mechanics of a changing climate and shifting geography. It reformatted an entire ecosystem in a few 100,000 years. It serves as a stark reminder. The world we inhabit is not a final state, but a fleeting arrangement. The lines we draw in the sand, between species, between epochs, between worlds, are drawn by forces far greater than ourselves, and they can be erased just as suddenly by the turning of the tide. In the grand chronicle of the Cenozoic era, a few 100,000 years is but a fleeting moment. It is the geological equivalent of the snap of a finger. Before this fateful instant, one Europe. After, another entirely. A world reborn, with different animals, different flora, a different and unrecognizable dynamic. The Europe of the Eocene epoch was a world swathed not in familiar temperate forests, but in a humid, tropical embrace. A continent akin to the modern jungles of Southeast Asia, warm, wet, and teeming with a vast diversity of strange and wonderful creatures. Here, primitive horses, no larger than dogs, navigated the denstows. Small, nimble predators, reminiscent of today's civets, hunted their strange prey. Then, in that geological instant, it all vanished. Replaced, as if a celestial hand had wiped the slate clean and begun to draw anew. This event, the Grande Coupure, or Great Break, is one of those moments in Earth's history that, when contemplated for too long, instills a peculiar sensation. A deep understanding that the world we inhabit, any world at any given moment, is not a permanent reality. It is a temporary configuration, a transient arrangement of life and land that, with the next climatic shift, the next tectonic shudder, the next great break, will inevitably change. Not always catastrophically, sometimes simply, slowly, and unstoppably, until one day we might awaken to find that everything has become other. This great break reveals what was, but it also forces us to ask what might have been, had a far greater cataclysm been avoided. It is a thought experiment, but one grounded in rigorous science. In the year 1999, paleontologist Dale Russell of the Canadian Museum of Nature published a paper that sent ripples of both fascination and caution through the scientific community. He took one of the most intellectually promising dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous, Troodon formosus, and extrapolated its evolutionary journey. He posed a profound question. If the asteroid had missed, if the dinosaurs had been granted another 66 million years, what might this creature have become? The result of his extrapolation was a being he called the Dinosauroid, a troodontid humanoid, a creature of upright posture, possessing a significantly enlarged brain and bearing three-fingered hands capable of complex manipulation. It was not human, but it was, in a profound sense, functionally convergent with humanity. Not because evolution has a final goal of creating mankind, but because an upright stance, a large brain, and manipulative limbs are a devastatingly effective solution to a specific set of ecological challenges. Given enough time, nature arrives at this solution again and again. Russell's work was, quite rightly, critiqued for its speculative leaps, for an overconfidence in its extrapolation. The criticism was fair, yet the core idea that intelligence and bipedalism could have evolved within the dinosaur lineage was never truly dismissed. For Troodon itself showed the seeds of this potential. It possessed the largest eyes relative to its body of any known dinosaur, suggesting a keen, stereoscopic hunter's vision. It had a brain proportionally vast for its time, and its long forelimbs, ending in grasping claws, already hinted at a future of manipulation. The implication is staggering. Intelligence, the kind we consider uniquely our own, is not some exclusive property of the mammalian line. It is a solution, a potential outcome that evolution can arrive at through vastly different pathways. Had the cosmic die roll been different, had the skies remained clear 66 million years ago, the dominant, tool-wielding intelligence on this planet might not look into the mirror and see a primate, but the distant reptilian gaze of an heir to the Earth. A world not our own could have been. A civilization might have risen through the line of the dinosaur we could never know, conceiving of a universe in ways we cannot imagine. But the asteroid fell, and in their place there was us, the mammals, the descendants of those who hid in burrows, who scurried in the shadows of giants. Every time one contemplates this fact, the sheer contingency of the entire Cenozoic era becomes overwhelming. Not meaningless, but utterly, profoundly unplanned. Every turn could have been different. Had the asteroid's trajectory been shifted by a mere 1,000 kilometers to the north, it might have plunged into the deep ocean. The impact would have unleashed a colossal tsunami, a wall of water to scour the coastlines, but perhaps not the planetary firestorm, not the shroud of dust that starved the sun and annihilated the dinosaurs. The age of mammals might never have truly begun. Consider the land itself. Had the Isthmus of Panama risen from the sea 5 million years earlier, the Great American Biotic Interchange, that vast continental collision of fauna, would have unfolded in a different epoch. The evolutionary victors and vanquished would be utterly transformed, and the creatures of two continents today would be unrecognizable. Or consider our own story. Had Africa and Eurasia not ground against one another in the Miocene, creating a terrestrial bridge, the ancestors of humanity who first walked upright out of Africa would have been confined to their cradle. The human saga would have been a purely African one, its expansion across the globe an impossibility written in the language of plate tectonics. Each of these events was a tectonic shift, quite literally, and each one altered the course of the Cenozoic irrevocably. Not because it was destined, but simply because it happened. This is one of the strangest and most profoundly calming thoughts in the story of our world. Calming because it liberates us from the illusion of a preordained path, the comforting fiction that everything is proceeding according to some grand design. The Cenozoic is not going where it is supposed to. It is simply flowing where the terrain of possibility allows. And in this unscripted, meandering journey, everything we know arose. Every creature, every ecosystem, every intricate adaptation, including ourselves. Among this tapestry of reactive genius, one of the most elegant examples of adaptation is the story of the horse. Not the creature of bridle and saddle, a story too recent and too intertwined with our own. This is a far deeper epic, the 56 million year odyssey from Hyracotherium to Equus. We begin at the dawn of the Eocene, 56 million years ago, in the dappled light of North American forests. Here lived Hyracotherium, the dawn horse. It was a creature no larger than a fox, with 4 toes on its forefeet and 3 on its hind, perfectly suited for the soft, damp forest floor. Its teeth were low-crowned, designed for a gentle diet of leaves and fruit. It was a secretive animal, hiding from predators in the undergrowth. Had you seen it, you would never have called it a horse. You might have mistaken it for some strange, timid deer. But the world did not stand still. Over the next 56 million years, the climate shifted. The warm, wet world cooled and dried. The great forests retreated, and in their place, a new... And as the world changed, so did the horse. On the open plain, survival demanded speed, and explosive power to outrun predators. The multi-toed foot, so useful in the forest, was a liability here. Natural selection began its slow, relentless work. Generation by generation, the side toes receded, shrinking into vestigial ghosts within the leg, while the central toe grew stronger, longer, and tipped with a hard, keratinous sheath. A single, powerful hoof, a spring-loaded pillar, was a far more efficient instrument for thundering across the hard-packed earth. The food itself had changed. Grass is an abrasive, unforgiving substance, laced with silica that nothing. The response was a revolution in dental architecture. Teeth that grew taller, with complex, winding ridges of enamel, creating a powerful grinding mill that could withstand a lifetime of chewing. The legs lengthened, the body grew in stature, not as part of a plan to become magnificent, but simply to cover more ground with every stride. Step by step, without plan or purpose, the horse was sculpted by its new reality. 12 million years ago, Dinohippus appeared, a creature already bearing the unmistakable silhouette of its future. Then, 4 million years ago, came Equus, the modern genus, its form forged in the crucible of the spreading plain. This was not a climb towards perfection. It was a response, an unwritten symphony of cause and effect, played out across geological time. The Ted, it is a river, carving a canyon through the landscape of the possible. Its course dictated not by a destination, but by the hardness of the rock it encounters along the way. It began with a ghost. an echo of a lineage that would one day branch into the thundering herds of horses, the starkly painted zebras, and the humble, enduring donkeys. Its cradle was North America, but its destiny lay across the world. Long before the first humans, this ancestor embarked on an immense odyssey, crossing the Bering Land Bridge, a vanished corridor of ice and earth, to populate the vastness of Asia. Then, 12,000 years ago, a profound silence fell. The creature that had been born of North America vanished from its homeland. It was a casualty of the great Pleistocene extinction, a continental upheaval that claimed mammoths and saber-toothed cats, and with them, the original American horse. The slate was wiped clean. For 12 millennia, the plains and forests that had shaped its evolution knew it no more. Its return was not a product of nature, but of human ambition. In the 15th century, it came back not as a wild creature, but as a tool of conquest, packed in the dark, swaying hulls of Spanish galleons. The horse had survived its American extinction by thriving in Eurasia. There, on the windswept steppes, its fate became irrevocably entwined with our own. Around 6,000 years ago, near the lands of modern-day Kazakhstan, the people of the bowtie culture looked upon this animal and saw not just prey, but a partner. They were the first to tame its wild spirit, and in doing so, they altered the course of human history. This single act of domestication redrew the map of the world. It gave birth to the steppe empires. Genghis Khan, without a horse, is merely a man with a bow, a local chieftain. Upon horseback, he is the master of half the known world. His army is a storm of hooves and arrows flowing across continents. Alexander of Macedon, on foot, is a brilliant tactician with a finite reach. Astride his war horse, he is an emperor who marches his phalanxes to the Indus River. For the last 6,000 years, our wars, our trade, our very conception of space and time have been shaped by the rhythm of a horse's gallop. The entire journey spans 56 million years. It is a single, unbroken line stretching run of a Kazakh warrior to the armored steed of a conquistador, and finally to the wild Mustang of the American plains, a descendant of exiles returning home after a 12,000-year absence. It is a story of survival through tectonic shifts, through radical climate change, through extinction and restoration. At the end of this line stands an animal that is a direct product of the Cenozoic era, a living testament to millions of years of adaptation to the slow, inexorable expansion of the world's grasslands. Yet this epic saga, played out upon the continents, is but one thread in the Cenozoic's grand tapestry. While the horse was conquering the land, an entirely different story of devastation and rebirth was unfolding in the deep. The asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs struck the seas with a unique and silent cruelty. The immediate water, triggering a catastrophic event of ocean acidification. The very water became a solvent. The beautiful, coiled shells of the ammonites, icons of the Mesozoic, dissolved into nothing eth their last. At the very foundation of the marine food web, the plankton collapsed, starving the oceans from the bottom up. Recovery was not swift. For 2 million years, the oceans were a shadow of their former glory, a wounded ecosystem struggling to heal. But life, in its relentless patience, endured. As the world settled into the warmth of the Eocene, the seas, now rich in nutrients left by the Old World, exploded with a new diversity. This was the dawn of the modern ocean. The first true ancestors of the fish that swim today, the tuna, the cod, the mackerel, began to fill the void, diversifying into the forms we now know. The Cenozoic seas became a crucible for a new age of marine life. One lineage crossed a bridge of land, the other a chasm of extinction. Both tell the same fundamental truth, that the world we inhabit is not a static stage, but a relentless story of loss and renewal. It is a story written in the bones of the earth and the currents of the sea, a reminder that every creature, whether on the plains or in the abyss, is the survivor of a journey almost too vast to comprehend. The first modern sharks patrol the depths, but the true revolution is unfolding at the surface. A great return is underway. Life, having once conquered the land, now turns back to the sea. The pioneers of this reverse invasion are mammals. Whales, descended from land-dwelling ancestors, begin their epic journey back into. Warm blood is plunging into the cold deep. Creatures who breathe air are reclaiming a world of water. They are colonizing the vast ecological voids left vacant by the extinction of the great marine reptiles. This is a perfect illustration of the Cenozoic era's fundamental operating principle. Where a space opens, life will rush to fill it. There is no grand design, no conscious plan. There is only opportunity. A vacuum that, by the sheer probability of existence, will sooner or later be occupied. For millions upon millions of years, the roles of apex predator and colossal filter feeder had belonged to the reptiles. Once they vanished, the oceans fell silent. But after a few million years, the same roles were claimed anew, this time by mammals. They arrived with a different biochemistry, a different physiology, and entirely different strategies for survival. Yet they slipped into the very same ecological costumes. This phenomenon is known as convergent evolution. It is one of the most profound and beautiful truths in biology. The process by which separate, unrelated lineages independently arrive at similar solutions to the same essential problem. Consider the ichthyosaurs of the Mesozoic. They were reptiles, contemporaries of the dinosaurs, yet their bodies were a masterclass in aquatic design. Streamlined, powerful, with fins and a tail perfectly tuned for speed. They looked, different evolutionary heritage, emerge looking almost identical to the long-extinct ichthyosaur. One body plan, discovered twice. The shape is an optimal solution to the challenge of moving with speed and grace through the dense medium of water. Nature, it seems, solved the same equation on two separate occasions, using entirely different biological materials separated by an impassable chasm of 65 million years. Both times, it arrived at the same elegant answer. This speaks to the very nature of solutions. It suggests that a correct answer is recognizable, regardless of who never met, never saw one another, and never exchanged a single strand of genetic information, can become near perfect mirrors across the eons. The ichthyosaur and the dolphin are twins born of the same unyielding constraints. The water is the same, the physics immutable, the problem was the same. And this was no isolated incident. On land, the Cenozoic provides a gallery of convergence. The fearsome saber-toothed morphology, for instance, evolved independently on at least 4 separate occasions. It appeared were not cats at all. It appeared in another distinct family, the Barbarophilids. And most astonishingly, it appeared in South America with Thylacosmolus, a marsupial more closely related to a kangaroo than a tiger. 4 distinct lineages, on different continents, separated by millions of years of evolution. Each one developed the same terrifying tommoths and giant ground sloths. The biological problem of how to kill a megabeast had a brutally effective solution, and evolution found it again and again and again. There is a deep logical beauty in this, not merely an aesthetic one, but the beauty of an undeniable principle. It reveals that within the grand, chaotic experiment of life, there are such things as correct answers. Not in a moral sense, but in the unforgiving calculus of physics and biology. There are challenges with optimal solutions, and given enough time and enough attempts, nature will inevitably stumble upon them, time after time. This relentless search for the optimal form, dictated by the unyielding laws of the universe, would set the stage for the planet's next great upheaval. An upheaval driven by the shifting climate of the last 5 million years, and by the emergence of a single, fateful species. To understand what we have become, we must first confront the world that made us. The story begins 5 million years ago with the dawn of an epoch known as the Pliocene. It was here that the Earth's pulse began to change, to quicken. The slow, geological breathing of earlier ages gave way to something more violent, more rhythmic. The planet's climate began to shudder. These were not gentle, meandering shifts. They were vast, almost periodic cycles of ice and warmth, of advance and retreat. Roughly every 100,000 years, the world was remade. A great glacial period would descend, locking continents in ice. Then, just as abruptly, an interrelentless planetary rhythm is governed by the Milankovitch cycles, the subtle celestial waltz of our world's orbit and the slow nod of its axis, altering the measure of sunlight that falls upon the high latitude. And it was within this great oscillating machine of climate that our ancestors were forged. They did not evolve in a stable paradise, but in a world of perpetual crisis. Every 100,000 years, the rules of existence were rewritten. The climate changed. The forests they knew vanished, replaced by open grasslands. The herds they hunted disappeared, and new, unfamiliar creatures emerged. The very resources that sustained life were in constant flux. To survive in such a world, a species could not afford to be a master of one trade. It had to become a master of change itself. The premium was not on adapting to a specific condition, but on possessing the innate capacity for adaptation. The ultimate trait was not strength, but flexibility. This, perhaps, is the profound explanation for the human brain. It was not forged to solve a single problem, not to hunt the mammoth, nor to build a shelter, nor to master fire. It was forged to solve all of them, and 1,000 others not yet imagined. The brain is an evolutionary paradox. It is a monstrously expensive organ. Weighing a mere 2% of our body's mass, it consumes a staggering 20% of our total energy. In the brutal calculus of nature, such an investment is almost indefensible. Nothing survives that is so profoundly inefficient. Unless the return is even more profound. That brain, that calorie-devouring engine of cognition, offered a currency more valuable than any physical specialization. It offered the ability to find a solution in a world that had never existed before. It granted the power to predict a future based on the patterns of the past. It allowed for learning not just from one's own brutal experience, but from the experience of others, through observation, and most critically, through the telling of a story. Consider the fate of the truly specialized. The Forus rhacos, the great terror bird, was a masterpiece of lethal design, perfectly honed for its environment. But when that environment changed, its perfection became a cage. It could not adapt, it vanished. Homo sapiens, by contrast, is a specialist in the art of being a generalist. Our niche is flexibility itself. Our advantage was never speed, nor crushing strength, nor sharpened teeth. It was the ability to change the strategy when the old one failed, the capacity to invent something. This singular ability is the direct inheritance of those Pleistocene climate swings. We are the descendants of those who could adapt. The others, the rigid and the specialized, simply did not survive in numbers sufficient to leave a legacy. We are, in the most literal sense, the children of an unstable climate. We are the progeny of the great rhythmic glaciations, of a world where constancy was the fleeting exception and profound change was the only rule. And so we are left with a deep and unsettling truth. We were built for a world of predictable upheaval, a rhythm of crisis and renewal. It makes one wonder how such a creature, forged in relentless transformation, is meant to fare in a world that has become too stable, or one whose changes are no longer rhythmic, but chaotic and of our own making. We are finely tuned for a certain cadence of change, and in its absence, we may find ourselves profoundly and dangerously out of place. There is a rhythm to our world, a great, slow pendulum, swinging with predictable grace across the ages. These are the Milankovitch cycles, the cosmic metronome of Earth's climate, dictated by the subtle shifts in our planet's tilt, wobble, and orbit. For millions of years, it has swung. It was swinging when Homo sapiens first emerged from the grasslands of Africa. It is swinging now. But a new factor has been introduced into this ancient planetary equation: ourselves. We have added a foreign variable to the system, a pressure it has never known. We have introduced a velocity of change that is utterly out of sync with the geological rhythm, a discordant frequency in the Earth's long song. What will come of this, the Cenozoic era does not yet know. It offers no announcements, no guarantees. It simply continued. 66 million years ago, in a world scoured by fire and shrouded in dust, a tiny creature huddled in its burrow and survived the end of a world. It did not endure because it was strong, but because it was adaptable. Because it knew how to hide. Because it knew how to wait. And when the long darkness finally lifted, it emerged and began again. This is the story of the Cenozoic. This is the story of us. One unbroken narrative stretching across 66 million years. A story with no author, no pre-written plan. It is simply life, persisting because persistence is its very nature. The pendulum swings. And there are places on this earth where the Cenozoic is not a concept in a textbook, but a physical reality etched into the landscape. A place where its history is laid bare, right beneath your feet. In the state of Utah, in the United States, lies Bryce Canyon. Here, an army of silent sentinels stands guard. They are the hoodoos, eerie pillars of stone, sculpted by the patient, relentless hand of erosion from limestone and mudstone. They blush in a spectrum of pinks, oranges, deep reds, and chalky whites, each band of color a testament to the mineral composition of a specific moment in time. Each layer is a page, each pillar a chapter. Down below, the rock speaks of the Eocene. Higher up, the story transitions to the Oligocene. Higher still, the Miocene. The entire chronology of our age is presented in a single, breathtaking vista, rising within canyon walls that climb 300 meters toward the sky. Geologists call this vast sequence the Grand Staircase. It is a colossal geological ladder, its lowest rungs anchored deep in the Grand Canyon, in the most ancient rocks of the Proterozoic and Paleozoic. As you ascend, you climb through the Mesozoic, the age of reptiles, until you reach the top step at Bryce Canyon, the Cenozoic, our era. Written in stone, in color, in the very shape of pillars that the wind continues to carve, even as we walk. Every year, Bryce Canyon erodes by roughly 30 centimeters. The hoodoos crumble, and as they fall, new ones are revealed beneath them. This is not a catastrophe, it is simply time made visible. The same inexorable force that created our world continues to remake it, slowly, unstoppably, and with perfect indifference to any observer. But beyond its sublime beauty, this place is also an archive. Locked within its layers are the fossils, the concrete evidence of the life that was. In the Eocene strata, geologists have unearthed the remains of primitive horses, the ancestors of Eohippus, the dawn horse. In the Oligocene layers, the climate, all recorded in the chemical signature of the rock. Bryce Canyon is not merely a place, it is a three-dimensional library of deep time, a codex into which one can physically walk and wander between the pages of Earth's most recent and most dramatic epoch. There are places on this Earth where time is a physical presence, where it can be touched, its immense weight felt in the palm of your hand. Millions of years as a concept in a book is an abstraction, a number too vast for the mind to truly hold. But millions of years etched into the wall of a canyon, layer upon sedimentary layer, is something else entirely. Here, the scale becomes tangible. It bypasses the intellect and is perceived directly by the body, a strange, vertiginous, and quietly terrifying sensation. This is a true contact with our own epoch, the Cenozoic. Not a communion through text, but through stone. It is from such stone that our own story is painstakingly chipped away. In the year 1924, in the dust-choked limestone quarries of Tong, South Africa, a crude wooden crate filled with bones was sent to a young anatomist named Raymond Dart. Miners, blasting rock from the earth, had unearthed a peculiar fossilized skull and thought the scientist might find it of interest. Dart opened the crate, and for the next several weeks, the world outside his laboratory ceased to exist. He worked with dental picks and knitting needles, delicately freeing the fossil from its rock matrix. What emerged was the face of a child. It was not human, nor was it ape. It was something suspended between the two. The skull was small, with large, forward-facing eye sockets, and a set of teeth that were uncannily more human than simian. In 1925, Dart published his findings. He named the creature Australopithecus africanus, the southern ape of Africa, and made a claim that would ignite a firestorm. He had found a transitional form, an ancestral link between apes and humankind. The scientific establishment, particularly the towering figures of British academia, met his announcement not with curiosity, but with scorn. The response was almost universal ridicule. The cradle of humanity, they insisted, could not possibly be in Africa. It was Luz to the recognized centers of ancient civilization. For years, Raymond Dart stood almost entirely alone, defending his Tong child against a consensus built on prejudice, protecting his discovery from skepticism, and weathering the damage to his own reputation. He was a lone voice against an empire of established thought. But the stone does not lie. And in time, the stone began to speak, with a chorus of voices. More fossils emerged, and more. From the gorges of Olduvai to the riverbeds of the Afar Triangle, Africa began to surrender its secrets. More Australopithecines, the tool-making hands of Homo habilis, the globe-trotting legs of Homo erectus. Again and again, the evidence pointed to one continent. Slowly, grudgingly, the paradigm shifted. Dart had been right. Africa was the crucible. It was here, in the immense geological scar of the Great Rift Valley, where tectonic plates pull the continent apart, that the central drama of the Cenozoic played out, the story of us. Raymond Dart died in 1988 at the age of 95. He had lived long enough to see his lonely hypothesis become scientific bedrock. He lived to see Lucy. She was found in 1974 in the searing heat of Hadar, Ethiopia, by a team led by Donald Johansen. A skeleton 40% complete, a stroke of unimaginable fortune in the fossil record. She was dated to 3,200,000 years ago. A female who in life would have stood a mere 110 centimeters tall. That evening, in the celebratory camp, a Beatles song played on a loop, and so she was named Lucy. Lucy's brain was tiny, less than 400 cubic centimeters, barely larger than that of a moth, and almost certainly no language. But an examination of her pelvis and knee joint revealed an astonishing, world-altering truth. Lucy walked upright. 3,200,000 years ago, this small creature strode across the African savanna on two legs. This is the profound revelation she offers. We did not become human because we developed a large brain. We developed a large brain because we first stood up. That simple, revolutionary act of bipedalism freed the hands to carry, to gesture, to create. It was the first, most fundamental step on the long road to consciousness. It was a question asked of the world, answered not with a word, but with a posture. And in that posture, in that first upright stride across an ancient landscape, began the most extraordinary journey life has ever known. 3,200,000 years ago, a lone figure moved across the Ethiopian savanna. She walked on two legs. In this simple, vertical act, a profound declaration was being made, a biological statement that would, over an unimaginable expanse of time, lead directly to us. Her name is Lucy. Her discovery would rewrite the story of our origins. It was the 18th of November, 1974, in the scorched earth of Hadar, within Ethiopia's Afar Depression. The paleoanthropologist Donald Johansen unearthed a fragment of bone, then another, and another. He would later recall, "I did not sleep that night." Back at the camp, there was an eruption of joy. They sang and danced, a celebration fueled by the profound significance of their find. To uncover such a skeleton is a moment of impossible fortune. The past is ruthlessly efficient at erasing itself. Soft tissues decay to dust, and even bone, the hardest part of us, surrenders to the chemistry of the soil. The vast majority of our ancestors vanished without a whisper, their existence an unwritten chapter. But Lucy left a trace. 40% of a complete skeleton, a miraculous survival against astronomical odds, named for a Beatles song that echoed through the camp's speakers into the ancient. To understand why she was there, why that specific landscape shaped her, we must look deeper into the very structure of the planet. Her story is inseparable from the Great Rift Valley, a colossal wound in the Earth's crust. This is not a single valley, but a sprawling system of fissures stretching for some 6,000 kilometers, beginning in the north of Ethiopia and tearing a path southward through Kenya, Tanzania, and Malawi, finally expiring in Mozambique. It is a place where a continent is slowly, inexorably breaking apart. The African tectonic plate is splitting in two. The process is agonizingly slow, a few millimeters each year, but over millions of years, this geologic tension has sculpted a unique world. It has sunk the land to create a shed of the crack, forming long, towering mountain ranges. This geology became a powerful engine of climate change. The rift's new mountains became a great wall, intercepting the moisture-rich winds blowing from the Atlantic. To the west of this barrier, the dense, wet rainforests of the Congo Basin continued to thrive. But to the east, in the rain shadow of the mountains, a new world was being forged. The environment grew drier, more seasonal. The endless forests began to shrink, giving way to open woodlands and vast grasslands. It was here, in this emerging savanna of East Africa, that our ancestors lived. It was here that the ability to stand tall, to see over the grass, to free the hands for carrying food or tools became a decisive advantage. Geology was sculpting our destiny. A fissure in the planet's crust created the precise climatic pressures that selected for those who could walk upright. The chain of causality is breathtakingly direct. Had the African plates moved on a different course, the Great Rift might never have formed. The climate to the east would have remained wetter, the forests more expansive. Our distant ancestors might well have remained in the trees, their evolutionary path mirroring that of the modern chimpanzee. This is not a metaphor or a simplification. It is one of the clearest examples of how the slow, grinding mechanics of plate tectonics can dictate the course of life itself. The planet moves, the climate shifts, the pressures of natural selection change, and new species are born. Nowhere is this bond between geology and biology more apparent than in the basin of Lake Turkana, one of the great rift lakes of northern Kenya. Its shores are a library of prehistoric life. As erosion carves away at the sediment, the seasonal rains peel back the layers of time, washing out a new harvest of bone. It was here that scientists found Homo rudolfensis, an early member of our own genus, who lived nearly 2 million years ago. It was here they found the remains of Paranthropus, evolutionary cousins with enormous molars, beings who gambled on a diet of tough, fibrous plants and ultimately lost, their lineage fading into extinction while ours endured. The work of discovery here is a living collaboration. The local Dasunak people, who have inhabited these shores for generations, sometimes find these ancient bones by chance. They understand their importance, reporting them to the scientists who work in the region. It is a quiet dialogue across millennia, a connection between those who live by the lake today and those who lived and died by its waters 2 million years ago. We carry the memory of that rift in our very anatomy. Our upright posture, the four ancestors' feet literally split apart. We are, in the most profound sense, children of a broken earth. 2 million years ago, beside the waters of Turkana. 3,200,000 years ago, in the dust of Hadar. 7 million years ago, in the vast emptiness of Chad. Here, a creature known as Sahelanthropus chadensis, unearthed by Michel Brunet in 2002, may represent the earliest known member of the human family tree. Each discovery adds a brushstroke to a portrait that remains hauntingly incomplete. The gaps persist not from a lack of searching, but because of a brutal truth. Preservation is the rarest of miracles. An infinitesimal fraction of what once lived has survived the ravages of time. The vast majority of our ancestors walked this earth and vanished without a whisper. They lived, they died, and they were reclaimed by the soil, their bodies dissolving back into the elements from which they came. Only through a cascade of improbable accidents, the precise chemistry of the sediment, the perfect speed of burial, the right geological sanctuary, were the few precious bones that tell our story saved from oblivion. It is a humbling realization that our entire knowledge of our own origins is built upon the caprice of geology. We know the name Lucy because she was one of the lucky ones. She died in a place where the chemistry was right, allowing her bones to slowly mineralize into stone. Her remains were not washed away by a river, nor were they scattered and crushed by the jaws of predators. Most of her contemporaries, the countless other Australopithecus afarensis who lived and breathed alongside her, were not so fortunate. They are lost to us forever, their lives and their stories erased. We will never know who they were. Our history, then, is a text written by the lottery of preservation. Those we study are the winners, the statistical anomalies. The rest is an immense, dark silence from which a tangible form occasionally emerges. A child's skull discovered in a quarryman's crate in Tong. A single bone washed from an eroding bank at Turkana. A partial skeleton from Hadar, given a name from a Beatles song, echoing across the millennia. But what if the cadence of this terrestrial story, the rhythm of its appearances and disappearances, was written not in the soil, but in the stars? This is not a metaphor. It is a literal cosmic proposition known as the Nemesis hypothesis, first developed in 1984 by the American astrophysicist Richard Muller. He observed a disturbing pattern in the history of lifeity, roughly every 26 million years. It is a pulse too regular to be mere chance. Muller's explanation was as audacious as it was elegant. Our sun, he proposed, is not alone. It has a companion, a dark, unseen twin star on a vast, eccentric orbit that takes it to the far-flung edge of our solar system. Out there lies the Oort cloud, a colossal, spherical shell of trillions of icy comets. Every 26 million years, this ghost star, which Muller named Nemesis, plunges through the cloud. Its gravitational passage is a catastrophic disturbance, dislodging countless comets from their stable orbits and sending a deadly shower hurtling towards the inner planets. Some inevitably strike the Earth. One such period of bombardment aligns perfectly with the impact that occurred 66 million years ago. The Nemesis hypothesis remains unproven. The star has never been found. Yet the name itself is potent. Muller chose it for the Greek goddess of retribution, who arrives on an unwavering 26 million year schedule to dispense cosmic judgment, wiping the slate of life nearly clean. Even if Nemesis does not exist, the idea it represents is profound. It suggests that the tempo of evolution, the great catastrophes and the subsequent bursts of creation that define our Cenozoic era, may be tied to forces far beyond our world. The rhythm of life and death on this planet could be choreographed by the silent dance of distant stars, the cyclical pulses of our galaxy, a grand and invisible cosmic mechanism whose workings we are only just beginning to comprehend. The story of life on Earth is not an isolated drama. It unfolds within a vast, dynamic arena, a galaxy that is itself in motion, a river of stars that shapes the conditions for existence. To grasp our own era, the Cenozoic, we must expand our sense of time to a scale that defies human intuition. We must think not in millions of years, but in the rhythm of the cosmos. One full rotation of our Sun around the galactic core takes approximately 225 million years. This is the galactic year. 66 million years ago, as the age of mammals dawned from the ashes of the dinosaurs, our solar system was in a different quadrant of the Milky Way. Since that moment, we have traversed merely a third of a single cosmic orbit. Within this fraction of a galactic journey, our entire story has unfolded. It is one continuous narrative, an unbroken thread stretching from a tiny, trembling creature hiding in a burrow to a species that now possesses the consciousness to contemplate the very galactic years that carry it. But this journey has also been a story of profound loss. When we speak of biodiversity, we often cast our gaze upon the present, cataloging what remains. This is a profound misunderstanding. The world we inhabit is a shadow of its former self, an echo of a far richer past. The true zenith of mammalian diversity did not occur in our time, nor even in the time of our earliest human ancestors. It occurred in the Middle Miocene, some 15 million years ago. Then, the Earth hosted a menagerie of life that would beggar our modern imagination. The continents teemed with a greater variety of large mammal species than at any other point in history, more than existed during the Ice Ages, and vastly more than exists today. This was the planet's biological peak. From that summit, a long, slow descent began. First came the subtle but inexorable chill of global climate change, shifting ecosystems and closing off evolutionary pathways. Then, the great Pleistocene winnowing, as cycles of ice ages locked the world in their frozen grip, placing immense pressure on all life. And at last, a new force emerged, a species whose ingenuity became a geological power, humanity. Each of these stages acted as a filter, stripping away another layer of the Miocene's incredible richness. We were born into a world already in mourning, a planet biologically poorer than the one our distant primate ancestors knew. And we have only accelerated its diminishment, not from malice but from scale, from the sheer weight of our numbers and the multiplying force of our tools. Here, the Cenozoic reveals one of its most sobering patterns, a fundamental asymmetry between creation and destruction. The accumulation of biological wealth, the intricate tapestry of species woven over eons, is the work of millions of years of stability and gradual adaptation. It is a slow, patient filling of every conceivable niche. Its annihilation, however, can be the work of a single, dominant species in a handful of millennia. Creation is patient, ruin is swift. This may be the most vital, the most practical lesson the age of mammals has to offer us. Yet the Cenozoic is not simply a eulogy. Its final chapter is not written in ash. No great extinction in Earth's history has ever been the final word. Each cataclysm years ago, life returned. First, a world of fungi, feasting in the gloom. Then, the patient return of green shoots. And finally, the stirring of animals. When ancient connections between continents were severed, life adapted. When new land bridges formed, such as the isthmus that united the two Americas, life surged across them, creating novel, hybrid ecosystems. Each time the slate was wiped clean, but never entirely. Something small, something adaptable, something that knew how to wait in the darkness, always survived. And from those humble survivors, the world was repopulated. This relentless pattern of resilience is the great counterpoint to the story of loss. It offers no special comfort for any single species, for the survivors are rarely the masters of the previous age. It is a testament not to permanence, but to persistence. Life, in its boundless, relentless drive, endures the fall of worlds. The question that hangs in the silence of our diminished age is not whether life will continue, but in what form, and whether we, who have learned to read this cosmic history, will have any part in the chapter yet to be written. The Cenozoic era makes no promises. It offers no guarantees of survival. This is not a theory, but a pattern, etched into the deep history of our world, a persistent, repeating motif of existence against all odds. Life endures, not because some higher power protects it, but because it is forged from a substance that does not know how to surrender. It is a force that, in any crevice, any burrow, any dark and damp fissure, discovers a way to continue. A network of fungi thriving in the suffocating darkness beneath a world on fire. A small, furred creature curled in a burrow as the sky falls. Its world reduced to the scent of damp earth and the tremors of a dying age. An Australopithecine, poised at the edge of a shrinking forest, taking its first hesitant steps into the vast, exposed savanna. A Cro-Magnon artist, deep within the Chauvet cave, their face illuminated by the flickering glow of a tallow lamp, breathing life onto stone with charcoal and ochre. They shared a single, unspoken imperative: to continue, to persist against the darkness, the cold, the crushing weight of the unknown. They simply went on, because that is the only thing life has ever truly mastered since the dawn of the Cenozoic, since the dawn of life itself. And now there is us, the latest link in this unbroken chain. Not the final one, merely the latest. From a hole in the ground, across 66 million years, to here. Armed with language, with cities, with libraries filled with questions about our own origins. This very narrative, this reflection on the Cenozoic, is itself a product of the Cenozoic. Because the era did not end. We are living within its unfolding story. This text is a Cenozoic artifact, another link in the chain that began in a burrow beneath an asteroid's shadow and stretches onward into a future we cannot yet see. The great pendulum of climate continues its swing. The tectonic plates drift indifferent. The East African rift widens, a millimeter each year. In 10 million years, this fissure will tear a continent apart, and East Africa will become a vast island. In 50 million years, the Mediterranean Sea will vanish, crushed out of existence as Africa collides with Europe. And in 250 million years, the continents will converge once more into a single immense landmass, a supercontinent geologists have named Pangaea Ultima. And life, whatever form it has taken by then, will react. It will adapt. It will perish in some forms and arise in others, endlessly continuing. But within this immense chronicle, there are stories seldom told, epics of transformation that defy imagination. Consider the history of the elephants, not the giants we know today, but their ancestors. The lineage of the Proboscidea is a novel 50 million years in the writing, beginning with a creature of humble proportions and taking such extraordinary turns that paleontologists still debate its chapters. 55 million years ago, in the warm wetlands of North Africa, in the land we now call Egypt, lived a creature named Phosphatherium esquilii. It was not a giant, but an animal no larger than a rabbit. It possessed tiny, almost imperceptible tusks, and a set of teeth that held a subtle clue, a hint of a unique destiny that would separate its descendants from all other mammals of the time. Its fossilized remains were unearthed in the year 1996, discovered in the rich phosphate deposits of Morocco by two French paleontologists, Emmanuel Guillebrant and Jean-Louis Wellcome. This small creature was the beginning, the first whisper of a dynasty that would one day shake the earth with its footsteps. It is a testament to the Cenozoic's central truth, that from the smallest, most unassuming beginnings, life finds a way not merely to survive, but to become magnificent. The Cenozoic is not a history that is finished. It is the epoch we inhabit right now in this very moment. It is the story of the fungus in the dark, of Lucy and Hadar, of the relentless climatic cycles. The Cenozoic is us, still us, for now. In the phosphate-rich soils of what is now Morocco, a discovery was made. A name was given, born from the very rock that held its secrets. Phosphatherium, the phosphate beast. Here, in the ancient dawn of the mammals, was a creature scarcely larger than a rabbit, a quiet, unassuming beginning for a dynasty of giants. This was the whisper of what was to come, the humble progenitor of all proboscideans. From this tiny mammal would spring every mastodon, every mammoth, every dinothere, and eventually the elephants that walk the earth today. The journey from the size of a rabbit to a 7-ton titan was not a simple, linear ascent. It was a sprawling, 55-million-year epic of trial and error. The path of evolution is never a straight line. It is a tangled river that twists, branches, flows into dead ends, and carves new channels, creating forms so bizarre they defy modern imagination. Among the most astonishing of these evolutionary experiments was the Dinotherium, the terrible beast. For 22 million years, from the Miocene to the Pleistocene, it haunted the landscapes of Africa and Eurasia. This was a creature built on a colossal scale, some individuals reaching a staggering 4 meters at the shoulder, towering even over today's largest African elephants. But its defining feature was a radical, almost unsettling, departure from the familiar. Its tusks, deer jaw, curving. The purpose of this strange anatomy remains a subject of intense scientific debate. Were they used as grapples to pull down heavy branches? Or perhaps to strip the soft, nutritious bark from ancient trees? Some theories suggest they were tools for digging, anchoring into the earth to unearth succulent roots and tubers. We may never know for certain. We can only look at these fossilized hooks and wonder at the life they once led. What we do know with near certainty is that Dinotherium was not alone. It shared its world with our own distant ancestors. Its bones are found in the very same geological strata as those of Australopithecus and the earliest members of our own genus, Homo. They saw each other. Imagine the scene, a 4-meter titan of flesh and bone, its shadow falling over the savanna, and beside it, a small bipedal hominid, armed with little more than nascent intelligence. The beast was a herbivore, not a predator, but 4 meters of living power is a force of nature unto itself. For millennia, this giant with the downward-pointing tusks was a feature of our ancestral world, a creature of myth made real. Then, around 1 million years ago, it vanished. The reason 2 million years of existence, the terrible beast simply disappears from the fossil record. All that remains is its imposing skeleton and a profound silence. Yet, if the Dinotherium was a creature of unsettling mystery, another relative, the Platybelodon, was one of radical, almost mechanical strangeness. Flourishing in the Miocene epoch around 10 million years ago, it spread across Africa, Asia, and North America. Its most striking feature was a lower jaw that had elongated and flattened into an extraordinary natural shovel, tipped what? For many years, paleontologists envisioned Platybelodon wading through shallow swamps. Using this remarkable apparatus to dredge up snits on its teeth told a different story. The scratches and polish revealed a sideways shearing motion. It wasn't dredging mud, it was cutting tough, fibrous vegetation. The shovel was, in fact, a scythe. This creature, with a spade for a chin, roamed the Miocene grasslands, swinging its head from side to side, mowing down swaths of grass with its lower jaw. It is an image so peculiar it borders on the unbelievable. This was not an elegant tool, born of minimalistic design. It was a radical, brutally functional solution to the problem of harvesting food. Evolution had found a way, and it was utterly bizarre. But specialization comes at a price. Around 8 million years ago, the world's climate began to dry. The lush grasslands to which Platybelodon was so perfectly adapted began to transform. Its ecological niche, the world for which its strange jaw was built, disappeared. And with it, the shovel-tusker vanished forever. The great river of proboscidean evolution, however, flowed on. It meandered through the gomphotheres, the mastodons, and the iconic mammoths, eventually leading to the 2 species of elephant that remain. They are the last survivors of a magnificent and bewildering family tree, carrying the legacy of 55 million years in their genes. The ghosts of their strange cousins, the beast with hooks for tusks and the creature with a scythe for a jaw, are a testament to the boundless creativity of life and a quiet reminder that for every form that endures, countless others, no matter how powerful or strange, are ultimately reclaimed by time. Within the ancient lineage of the elephant, there is a quality spoken of less often than their colossal size or their ivory tusks. It is a profound intelligence, not in some metaphorical sense, but in a way that is tangible, measurable. They possess the largest brain of any terrestrial animal, a complex organ weighing nearly 5 kilograms. And within that intricate mass of neurons lies a capacity for self-awareness. They recognize themselves in a mirror. It is a simple test, yet it represents a cognitive Rubicon crossed by only a handful of species on this planet. Humans, chimpanzees, orangutans, dolphins, magpies, and the elephant. This awareness of self appears to extend into a realm that borders on the spiritual, a place of memory and ritual. Elephants remember their dead. When a herd encounters the scattered bones of a fallen member, their journey halts. They fall silent. They investigate, their trunks, those extraordinarily sensitive appendages, sniffing and gently touching the remains. This is not a random act, not a coincidence of curiosity. It has been documented countless times in disparate populations across decades of observation. Scientists debate the precise meaning. Is it grief? Recognition? A ritual? Cynthia Moss, the British zoologist who has dedicated her life to the elephants of Amboseli since 1972, has witnessed this solemn spectacle hundreds of times. Over 50 years of patient observation, she has described how elephants react differently to the bones of an individual they once knew. The attention is longer, the touch more deliberate. As a scientist, she is cautious with her words. She does not call it grief. But what she sees is profoundly difficult to explain in any other way. Consider the journey. 55 million years. From a small amphibious creature named Phosphatherium to the modern elephant, a being that stops at the sun-bleached skeleton of its kin and seems to contemplate the nature of mortality. 55 million years of evolution, culminating in a creature that perhaps understands that death exists. It is one of the quietest yet most significant conclusions of the Cenozoic era. But this story of emergent consciousness is not singular. We must turn from the savanna to the oceans, to the dolphin. Here, another story runs in parallel, intersecting with the elephants in the most unwithin a complex social fabric of long-term, meaningful relationship. In Australia's Shark Bay, dolphin mothers meticulously teach their daughters a unique skill: to wear a marine sponge over their sensitive rostrum while foraging along the abrasive sea floor. It is a tool, a form of protection. This is not instinct. It is a learned tradition, passed from one generation to the next. Here, two minds, forged in entirely different worlds, arrived at the same startling complexity, independently. This is the phenomenon of convergent evolution, but applied not to a body plan, but to intelligence itself. Just as the devastating saber-toothed fang appeared on at least 4 separate occasions in the fossil record, so too has this high-order social intelligence, complete with self-awareness and cultural transmission, appeared at least 3 times. In primates, our own lineage, in proboscideans, the elephants, and in cetaceans, the dolphins and whales. It suggests what the near-identical forms of the ancient ichthyosaur and the modern dolphin have always hinted at, that in the grand, chaotic experiment of life, there are certain optimal answers. That complex social intelligence is not a fluke, not an accident of our own history, but a fundamental solution to the challenges of existence. A destination that, given enough time and the right pressures, nature will find its way to, again and again, by entirely different paths. Across the vast expanse of evolutionary time, the phenomenon of high intelligence has emerged not once, but on 3 separate parallel paths. It is a striking case of convergent evolution, where nature, faced with a similar problem, arrives at a similar solution. And the common thread weaving through these disparate lineages is not diet, nor habitat, nor physical form. It is the intricate, demanding world of the social. Consider the elephants. Their society is a matriarchal dynasty, a complex structure built around the mind of the eldest female. Within her 5-kilogram brain resides a living library of survival, a map of water holes and migration routes stretching back 50 years, a memory of droughts and floods, of friends and of foes. Her knowledge is the herd's inheritance, the key to its persistence through the leanest of time. Or journey into the liquid world of the dolphins. Here we find not a stable hierarchy, but a fluid political theater of male alliances. These coalitions are not fixed, they shift and reform, a constant, complex calculus of cooperation and betrayal driven by circumstance. To navigate these ever-shifting currents of allegiance requires a mind capable of immense social agility, of tracking who is allied with whom and why. And then there are the primates, our own kin. Their lives are an intricate dance of politics, of hierarchical structures governed by coalitions, betrayals, and fragile truces. To thrive here is to be a master strategist. One must remember a lifetime of debts and grievances. One must predict the actions of others, not merely by observing what they do, but by inferring what they intend. This is the crucible of intellect. A complex social life is cognitively expensive. It demands a large, powerful brain, an organ hungry for energy. And that biological cost is justified only where the stakes are highest, in a social environment. Here, the ability to constantly model the minds of others, to anticipate, to deceive, to empathize, provides a direct and decisive advantage. Our intelligence, then, is not some random gift from the cosmos. It is an answer to a very specific question: how to survive amongst other minds. It is a question that nature has answered independently 3 times, in the elephant, the dolphin, and the primate. And each time, the solution bears an uncanny resemblance. We see the emergence of long-term memory, a profound capacity for learning, the cultural transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. And we see something else, something far more mysterious, a behavior that... The phrase is unsettling, and deliberately so, for we stand at the edge of knowing. When an elephant stands in silent vigil over the bones of a fallen herd member, gently touching the sun-bleached skeleton with its trunk, what is it experiencing? When a dolphin mother carries the body of her dead calf for weeks, refusing to let it sink into the abyss, does she comprehend the finality of its state? We do not know. We see only the behavior, concrete, measurable, and repeated. Our interpretation must be cautious, yet the behavior itself is undeniable. It is one of the most unexpected outcomes of the 56 million years of Mama perhaps grieve, that carry within them a depth that transcends the simple imperatives of survival and reproduction. Imagine if phosphothery, a creature 8,000 times its own weight, a being with a brain that alone weighs more than its entire body did. It would see this colossal heir stop its journey to caress the remains of the dead, a direct descendant across 55 million years of unbroken lineage, yet a completely alien being. This reveals one of the most profound truths of our Cenozoic era. The lineage is not the creature. The thread of life is unbroken, but the beings it weaves are transformed beyond all recognition. Phosphotherium would not know the elephant. Eohippus, the dawn horse, would not know the thoroughbred. And Purgatorius, break. The beings are not. And this relentless process of transformation, of lineages enduring while worlds change, is recorded not only in bone, but in the earth itself. Our story turns now to an event that occurred some 7 million years ago, an event still shrouded in debate. Deep within the geological strata of the Mediterranean basin, there lies a very strange layer. 7 million years ago, in the late Cenozoic, the world began to lose an ocean. It was not a gradual decline over eons, but a geological amputation. A slow, inexorable collision of continents pinched shut the narrow straits connecting the Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea. Where the Rock of Gibraltar now stands sentinel, a land bridge of solid rock rose, forming an immense, impassable dam. The Mediterranean, starved of its lifeblood from the ocean, was sealed. Its fate was now dictated by the sun. A slow-motion cataclysm began. Over the course of 270,000 years, a mere flicker in geological time, the sea evaporated. The water level fell, meter by painstaking meter, year by agonizing year. The basin did not dry out completely. In its deepest trenches, abyssal pools of hypersaline brine remained, toxic and forbidding. But across the vast majority of its expanse, the sea vanished, exposing a landscape from another world. The water's surface plummeted 3, even 4 kilometers below the level of the global ocean, creating a colossal depression on the face of the earth. What was left behind was a scene of profound desolation. An alien desert stretching for nearly 5 million square kilometers. On the former seabed, a layer of salt and gypsum began to crystallize, a mineral crust that in places would grow to be 3 kilometers thick. This was a basin of extremes, a place akin to Death Valley and the Dead Sea combined, but on a continental scale. The sheer weight of the atmosphere above would compress the air at the bottom, raising temperatures to unbearable levels. It was a shimmering, salt-scoured wasteland, silent and hostile to life. Yet the world's great rivers did not cease their journey. The Nile, the Rhone, the Po, which had once fed the sea, now found their destination to be a vast, empty chasm. To reach this new, impossibly low base level, they began to carve. The Nile, in its relentless descent, scoured a canyon into the bedrock more than 2 kilometers deep, a gorge far more profound than the Grand Canyon of today. For millennia, this colossal paleo canyon lay hidden, a geological ghost buried deep beneath the sediments of the river's delta. It was only in the 1970s, as drills bored into the earth beneath Cairo, that its true scale was revealed, a stunning discovery that forced a complete re-evaluation of a familiar landscape. Then, approximately 5,300,000 years ago, the Earth shifted once more. The tectonic dam at Gibraltar fractured. The Atlantic, held back for an epoch, finally broke through. It began to pour over the sill, a waterfall not of meters, but of kilometers. A cascade 1,000 times more powerful than the Amazon River, roaring into the empty basin with the force of a planetary cataclysm. For perhaps 1,000 years, the torrent continued, a relentless refilling of a void. The Mediterranean was reborn. This entire drama, the death and rebirth of a sea, played out millions of years before the first of our ancestors walked the earth. No hominin eyes ever witnessed the salt desert or the Great Flood. Yet the event's consequences rippled through time. The return of that immense body of water fundamentally altered the climate of the region, changing patterns of rainfall and transforming the ecology of North Africa and the Near East. It sculpted the environment, creating the very conditions, the specific pressures and opportunities that would shape the long, intricate story of human evolution. The world we inhabit is not a static stage, but a landscape of ghosts, of vanished oceans and forgotten canyons. The Messinian crisis is a profound reminder that history is written not just in stone and bone, but in the very absence of things, in the memory of a sea that disappeared and the thunderous roar of its return. It is a testament to the fact that the ground beneath our feet is never truly still. A deluge. It is a stark reminder that the story of the Cenozoic is not merely one of biology. It is a story of tectonics, of ocean chemistry, of climate and geography. It is the story of a world where everything is connected. A tectonic plate shifts. A strait of water, a vital artery between oceans, grinds shut. A sea, now landlocked, begins to die. Over millennia, the water evaporates under a relentless sun, leaving behind a colossal, crystalline desert of salt, a basin thousands of feet below the level of the world's oceans. The climate of continents is rewritten. Evolution, ever the opportunist, responds. Then the gate of stone reopens. The ocean returns, not as a gentle tide, but as a cataclysmic flood, a waterfall 1,000 times more powerful than any on Earth today, refilling the basin in a matter of years. The climate shifts once more, and again, evolution responds. Life is not a passenger on this planet. It is woven into its very fabric, a geological force in its own right, reacting to every tremor, every shift in the world's chemistry. This truth is written in the bones of the elephants that evolved in Africa, their destiny shaped by the periodic disappearance and reappearance of the Mediterranean Sea. It is true for our own ancestors, their journey out of the rift valleys of East Africa, driven by climatic pulses tied to these planetary dramas. It is true for the dolphins that swim in that same Mediterranean, a sea with a history of death and rebirth etched into its floor. Everything is interconnected. Everything responds to everything else. But this is only half the story. Life does not simply react, it acts. It actively transforms the planet, altering the very conditions of its own existence. There is a formidable term for this: biogeochemical interaction. A long phrase for a revolutionary idea. Life changes the chemistry of the atmosphere. Life changes the chemistry of the oceans. Life changes the composition of the soil. And these changes in turn create new evolutionary pressures, new pathways for life itself. In the Cenozoic, this process is laid bare. Consider the emergence of a humble new life form in the Oligocene epoch, grass. As grasslands spread, they fundamentally altered the chemistry of the soils beneath them. This new soil chemistry had a profound global impact on a process known as silicate weathering, the slow chemical breakdown of rock that draws carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. With less carbon dioxide, the planet cooled. This cooling, in turn, created the perfect conditions for the grasslands to expand even further. A planetary scale feedback loop set in motion by a blade of grass. Life changed the climate, and the climate changed the conditions for life, which reacted and changed the climate once more. This is the essence of the Gaia hypothesis, proposed in 1974 by the British scientist James Lovelock. The Earth, he argued, behaves as a single self-regulating system, where life and its non-living environment are inextricably linked. Lovelock did not mean the Earth is a conscious living creature. He meant that the countless interactions between biology and geochemistry create stabilizing feedback loops, which have maintained conditions suitable for life for billions of years. The Cenozoic is one vast, sprawling chapter of the Gaia hypothesis in action. We see it in the oceans, where countless trillions of microscopic plankton absorbed carbon dioxide, their calcite skeletons raining down onto the seafloor in a perpetual silent snowfall, forming vast deposits of limestone, locking that carbon away for millions of years. We see it in the great Cenozoic forests, where the symbiotic relationship between tree roots and mycorrhizal fungi accelerated the weathering of rock, once again pulling carbon from the sky. Life, through a billion silent chemical transactions, was unconsciously regulating the thermostat of the entire world. And here, the Cenozoic poses a question that echoes into our own time. If life has modulated and stabilized the Earth's climate for eons through these intricate, slow-moving biogeochemical cycles, what happens when a single species begins to alter these ancient, life-sustaining loops faster than the system can possibly respond? This is not the slow work of geology. It is not born of tectonic pressures or the patient exhalation of volcanic provinces across eons. This change is driven by industry, by the act of combustion, by the sudden, violent liberation of carbon preserved for ages in the deep rock and released in a geological instant. It is a question the Cenozoic has yet to answer, for in its 66 million years of history, it has known no true precedent. It has known the shock of an external blow, an asteroid from the dark, rewriting life in a flash of fire. It has known the slow internal fever of massive volcanic outpourings, powerful yet gradual. It has felt the rhythmic, predictable pull of orbital mechanics, a cyclical dance of ice and warmth. But a single species, in the span of 200 years, setting fire to a legacy of carbon 300 million years in the making. This is new. The Cenozoic has never witnessed such a thing. And so the system responds, as it always has. It reacts through the intricate machinery of its feedback loops, through the shifting chemistry of its oceans, through the inexorable migration of its climatic zones. But here lies the critical dissonance. The velocity of the impact and the velocity of the reaction are dangerously misaligned. The system's response is slower, more deliberate than the frantic pace of the disturbance. It is a deep, ancient mechanism, grinding into motion against a fleeting, modern force. What will happen when these two velocities attempt to reconcile? The system is responding, but it does so on its own terms, not ours. This is the fundamental truth we fail to grasp. When we speak of a climate crisis, our minds operate on a human scale, on decades, on the span of a single lifetime, perhaps a century. But the Cenozoic operates in different units entirely. For this ancient system, 1,000 years is a fleeting moment. 1,000,000 years is the normal cadence of change. When the planet begins to react to our present actions with its full, unbridled force, it may do so on a timescale that, from the perspective of human history, is indistinguishable from eternity. This is not a comfort, nor is it a warning. It is simply a matter of scale. The Cenozoic observes this present moment from its vast vantage point of 66 million years and sees something impossibly brief, a flicker, an event that is only just beginning. The asteroid, too, was just a moment, a single blinding flash of impact, and then 10 million years of consequences. The system knows what the consequences of this current moment will be. We do not. Yet there is something within the Cenozoic record that offers a strange and profound sense of calm. Not optimism, but calm. Every time the system has been struck, every time it has been thrown into chaos, it has recovered, it has healed, but never by returning to what it was. After the fire from the sky, the great reptiles did not return. In their place, the age of mammals was born. After the great cooling of the Grand Coupure, the lush, subtropical world of Eocene Europe did not re-emerge. In its place, the starker, seasonal landscapes of the Oligocene appeared. Recovery is not restoration, it is transformation. The system never goes back, it only goes forward into something new. And this brings us to a detail of the Cenozoic, a force deliberately held back until now. It is the story of the insects. In the grand narrative of our era, we speak of mammals, of birds, of the ghosts of great reptiles. We rarely speak of the insects. This is a profound oversight, because in the Cenozoic, the insects accomplished something that altered the face of the planet more fundamentally than any mammoth or megalodon. They survived the asteroid's fury far better than the vertebrates. They are small, they require less food, they reproduce with astonishing speed. Their populations rebound in seasons, not millennia. And they possess the ancient secret of diapause, a state of suspended life, a metabolic pause button that allows them to wait out the apocalypse. While the larger world burned, they simply waited. But they did not merely endure. They emerged into a changed world and became its primary architects. They forged an alliance that would paint the world in new colors, filling it with new scents and new forms of life. They became the couriers of pollen, the midwives to the great angiosperm revolution, turning a world of muted greens and browns into a vibrant, flowering kingdom. This silent, six-legged multitude built the ecosystems upon which we now stand. The system always finds its new form. It is the one constant in the long story of this world. The Cenozoic has seen fire from the sky and ice from the poles. Now it sees fire from the hand of a single species. The system will respond. It will rebalance. The only question that remains unanswered is what the world will become after us, and what forgotten, resilient force is waiting quietly for its turn. In the Paleocene, as the world recovered from the celestial blow that ended an age, the great vertebrates were ghosts. Their dynasties, built over 100 million years, were shattered, and their survivors struggled for a foothold in a wounded world. But while they limped through the wreckage, an ancient hum was already returning to the forests. The insects were at work. They were the planet's silent architects of recovery. They broke down the vast necropolis of the old world, decomposing organic matter on a planetary scale. They were the first pollinators for the hardy, opportunistic plants that dared to green the scarred earth. They became the foundational food source for the birds and mammals that would eventually rise to prominence. But their true masterpiece, their defining contribution to the Cenozoic era, was a partnership of breathtaking complexity, the evolution of pollination. This was not a new invention. The first flowering plants had appeared in the Cretaceous, and insects had begun their tentative dance with them then. But in the Cenozoic, this interaction exploded into an evolutionary spectacle of unparalleled diversity and intricacy. A silent 50 million year dialogue began between the insect and the flower. Bees, butterflies, flies, and beetles, each group began to specialize, drawn to particular colors, specific shapes, and intoxicating scents. In response, the flowering plants specialized in turn. The very architecture of a flower, its form, its hue, the precise hour of its blooming, the chemical signature of its perfume, became a tailored invitation, an answer to the anatomy and senses of a specific pollinator. This is coevolution. Two separate forms of life, locked in a feedback loop, each sculpting the other across deep time. The Cenozoic saw this principle create the riot of color and form that defines our modern landscapes. Every flower is a solution to the problem of attracting a particular courier. Every bee is a solution to the problem of finding a particular bloom. The result stands before us today in any flowering meadow, a living library of evolutionary solutions. Nowhere is this dialogue more radical, more cunning, than in the world of the orchids. Some have transcended partnership and embraced deception. Certain species mimic, with astonishing fidelity, the form and even the pheromonal scent of a female of a specific wasp species. The male wasp, driven by its most primal instinct, attempts to mate with this irresistible falsehood. In its futile efforts, it collects a packet of pollen, which it then delivers to the next floral counterfeit. The insect receives nothing for its efforts, no nectar, no sustenance. It is pure, calculated deception, honed over millions of years. The flower's shape grew ever more precise, its scent ever more convincing, ensuring the wasp would remain its unwitting, indispensable servant. This is not the product of a sinister intelligence plotting in a plant's mind. It is the blind, relentless algorithm of chemistry and selection. But the outcome is a ruse so perfect, so seemingly deliberate, that it challenges our belief in its random origins. 50 million years of chance mutation, and the result is a flower that tells a perfect, irresistible lie. This is the Cenozoic. Yet, even this intricate dance of flower and insect unfolds upon a stage governed by an older, vaster power. For while mammals rose and insects diversified, a silent Cenozoic was unfolding in the soil, in the oceans, and within the very bodies of the larger players. This was the era of the microbes. They are the true biomass of the planet, accounting for 99% of all life. We, and all the life we see, are a mere 1% rounding error. Consider the human form. Inside each of us resides a universe of some 38 trillion bacterial cells, a population that outnumbers our own. These are not random invaders or passive hitchhikers. They are ancient partners. Our lineage and theirs have traveled together for tens of millions of years, co-evolving in the most intimate of theaters. They have learned to live within us, and we have learned to live with them. Without their invisible labor, our digestion falters, our immune systems weaken, and even our behavior can be altered. They are a part of what we are. We see the Cenozoic as the age of mammals, or the age of flowers. But beneath it all, it is an age defined by connection. The flower cannot exist without the insect. The mammal cannot exist without the plant. And none, perhaps, can truly exist without the unseen microbial world that underpins it all. We are not individuals, but walking ecosystems. Not masters of a planet, but threads in a fabric woven by forces far older and more subtle than ourselves. Deep within us, a silent conversation is underway. Emerging evidence suggests that our very behavior, our moods and thoughts, are influenced by the teeming microbial world in our gut. This is the gut-brain axis, a frontier of biology, where conclusions are still drawn with caution, but the implications are staggering. It forces a radical re-evaluation of what we are. We are not a singular organism. We are an ecosystem, a walking, thinking, reading planet in miniature, home to 38 trillion bacteria alongside our own cells and a host of viruses and fungi. This collective is the we that contemplates the Cenozoic era. We are the product not only of our own evolution, but of a co-evolution, an intricate dance with thousands of other species that have made their home inside us. This, too, is a story, all available space. The mammalian gut is a perfect territory, warm, nutrient-rich, and shielded from the outside world. And so, bacteria colonized it. They seized the opportunity, just as our mammalian ancestors seized the empty niches left after the asteroid impact 66 million years ago. It is the same pattern that saw the ancestors of whales and dolphins return to the oceans, claiming the vast marine territories once ruled by giant reptiles. From the scale of a microbe to the scale of a planet, the principle is absolute. Life, wherever it finds a foothold, will flourish. But the Cenozoic saga is not yet complete. Forces have been set in motion on a timescale so vast, they will proceed irrespective of our presence. The African continental plate grinds relentlessly northward. In 10 million years, its journey will reach a dramatic conclusion. The Mediterranean Sea, the cradle of empires, will be sealed shut for the final time. A geological event on the scale of the Messinian salinity crisis will transform the region, leaving behind a vast, arid basin. Where the African and European plates collide and buckle, the Alps will be thrust even higher, and new mountain ranges will rise from the floor of a vanished sea. Europe's climate will be irrevocably altered, stripped of the moderating influence of its southern waters. Simultaneously, the Atlantic Ocean continues its slow but inexorable expansion, widening by about 2.5 centimeters each year. Yet this too is temporary. In perhaps 150 million years, this growth will halt and then reverse. New subduction zones will begin to form, pulling the ocean floor back into the Earth's mantle. And in 250 million years, the cycle will complete. The continents once again will merge into one. Pangea Ultima, a single immense supercontinent surrounded by a global ocean. What strange forms of life will walk the shores of that future world is a question beyond our capacity to answer. It depends entirely on which lineages survive the intervening eons. It depends on the great extinctions that will inevitably occur, for the history of life is a history of apocalypse and renewal. It depends on 1,000 random turns, each one capable of redirecting the entire course of evolution. The only certainty is that something will live. This is the single guarantee the Cenozoic offers. Not a specific species, not a particular form, but life itself. In the humid forests of Eocene egg, land animals on Earth. The fox-sized Eohippus, hiding in the North American undergrowth, could not conceive of the powerful horse it would one day become. And high in the trees, the tiny primate Purgatorius was utterly unaware that its lineage would eventually produce a species that would ponder its own origins. The creatures alive today are just as blind to their ultimate fate. They do not know what they will become in 50 million years, if they survive at all. This is not a source of sorrow, but a testament to scale. The Cenozoic does not think in terms of individual species, it thinks in terms of experiments. Every species is a hypothesis, a temporary solution to the puzzle of survival. And in the grand, impartial laboratory of time, most experiments are destined to fail. Some evolutionary lines reach their conclusion. Others endure, transforming into something new. The horn-faced Arsinotherium vanished into the fossil record. The line of elephants continues. The terror birds, the mighty forest wrasses, fell silent. Yet birds themselves persist in 10,000 different species. We are one of the current experiments. For now, we continue. For now, we transform, driven by a cultural evolution that never rests. The Homo sapiens of 10,000 years from now will be as different from us as we are from those who lived 10,000 years ago. The brain is almost the same, but the culture is entirely alien. Our tools are beyond comparison. Our relationship with the planet has been radically altered. The Cenozoic era observes this experiment with the same indifferent attention it gave the megalodon, the colossal Paraceratherium, and the terror birds. It offers no judgment, holds no preference. It simply records what unfolds, selecting for what works and terminating what has ceased. And in this dispassionate gaze, something strange emerges. We are the only known experiment of the Cenozoic that is aware of the Cenozoic itself. The only species that reads its history, that contemplates the megalodon, the ancient Phosphatherium, the great Zanclean flood. The megalodon never knew it was a titan of its age. An elephant, touching the bones of its kin, may feel a profound emotion, but it does not conceptualize the system. Only we know. Only we can ask, what comes next? And to this question, the Cenozoic provides no answer. It simply continues. Tectonic plates grind onward, a rift valley widens, an orchid perfects its mimicry of a female wasp. In this immense unfolding process, we exist, an experiment for now, still running.